Eurasia at Hudson Institute. I will be serving as the Master of Ceremonies today, helping to guide you through the program. The Central and Eastern European Strategy Summit today intends to reinforce the ties binding the U.S. to our Eastern European allies. The emphasis takes on particular importance as the transatlantic alliance finds itself at a critical juncture, facing unprecedented challenges to continued prosperity and security. We are thrilled to greet you all today, and I would like to welcome to the podium Executive Vice President Joel Scanlon for opening remarks. Joel?
Thanks, Dan, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hudson. As Dan said, I'm Joel Scanlon, Executive Vice President. I'm delighted to kick off what is now our third Central and Eastern European Strategy Summit. Together with my colleagues, I'd like to thank the high-level representatives from the region and the European Union who are participating, and the many embassy representatives who will be here today for being with us and for your collaboration on our programming throughout the year. Let me offer a special note of thanks to the PPF Group for its generous support of this summit once again, and in particular, I'd like to thank our friend Jan Ruzicka, PPF's Chief External Affairs Officer, for being here today, for your tremendous partnership, and if I can add, for being an excellent host in Prague. Jan will be in conversation with Ambassador Nikki Haley, Hudson's Walter P. Stern Chair, later today. Hudson Institute is a firm believer in the importance of strong transatlantic relations, in large part because it is in the U.S. national interest. We believe a strong European relationship, politically, diplomatically, economically, technologically, militarily, rather than being a distraction, also means a strong U.S. position with our allies and partners in Asia, the Middle East, and in our own hemisphere. Since its founding more than 60 years ago, Hudson has prided itself on unconventional thinking. At a time when some downplay the significance of Europe, we think stronger U.S.-European ties are as important as ever in meeting our challenges and our challengers. With the IMF World Bank spring meetings and a global economy, I think it's fair to say, is somewhat in flux as backdrop, today's Central and Eastern European Summit puts the focus appropriately on economics. The region of Central and Eastern Europe is home to many of the fastest growing economies in Europe, a strong industrial base and manufacturing capacity, and it is a natural partner for American companies and investors in defense, energy, technology, telecommunications, and other areas. We look forward today to hearing from the region itself. On behalf of Hudson Institute, welcome to the third Central and Eastern European Strategy Summit. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joel, very much. We are honored this morning to welcome Commissioner for Financial Services and Savings and Investment Union, Maria Luis Albuquerque, is here today, and she's going to kick off our discussions. The Commissioner graduated in economics from Lusida University in Lisbon in 1991 and has a master's degree in monetary and financial economics from the School of Economics and Management, Technical University of Lisbon. She served at the Directorate General of Treasury and Finance between 1996 and 1999, and at the Ministry of Economy from 1999 to 2001. Commissioner Albuquerque worked as advisor to the Secretary of State for Treasury and Finance and as director of the Department of Financial Management at REFER, the National Rail Company. From 2007 to 2011, she was head of Issuing and Markets, Portuguese Debt and Treasury Management Agency, and from June 2011 to July 2013, she served as Secretary of State for the Treasury, and from 2013 to 2015 as Minister of State and Finance. Commissioner Albuquerque served for 4 years as an elected member of the Almeida Municipal Assembly, and for 4 years as well as a member of Portuguese Parliament. The Commissioner served as a member of the Expert Group on High-Level Forum on Capital Markets Union of the European Commission, and has held roles in the private sector, including as an independent non-executive director at Morgan Stanley Europe and Aero Global Group. She has served as the advisory board of INDEG, IST-CTE Executive Education, and as a member of the operating team of Horizon Equity Partners. With that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Commissioner Luis Albuquerque.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the lengthy description of my profile. I mean, I've been around for long. That's why it takes longer. Anyway, good morning, everyone, and I would like to thank the Hudson Institute for inviting me to speak at today's Strategy Summit. And before you dive into the regional specificities of Central and Eastern Europe countries, which is the focus of this conference, I would like to set the scene with a broader European context to discuss how we can make our markets more efficient and resilient to bring wealth and growth to European citizens and businesses. During the last few months, the European Commission has been shaping the priorities for our Union amid complex and challenging circumstances, as underlined in several reports. Europe needs change and needs to grow. We are being ambitious, clear, and we are committed to deliver. First and foremost, to deliver on the European single market, our main strength. In the current circumstances, neither EU businesses nor EU citizens can sustain the cost of not having a true single market. In a recent IMF study, this cost for financial services alone was estimated to an equivalent of 100% tariff on financial services. While some other tariffs are beyond our direct influence, this tariff equivalent is not. The Savings and Investments Union we presented only a month ago is an instrument, an enabler for growth and competitiveness in the EU, deepening the single market, and it reinforces our resilience to shocks. It will allow us to build a more competitive, green, digital, and fair Europe, where citizens can accumulate wealth and companies can grow, innovate and create jobs, whether in Central, Eastern, or any other geographic sub-region of the EU. It builds on the progress of our previous capital market strategies and combines those with our efforts to reinforce the banking system, our banking union. We know that smaller markets are particularly put to the test and are afraid of being left out. I hear that often. But the Savings and Investments Union has a specific feature I am particularly proud of. It creates space and allows for deeper integration among member states, to learning from their experiences and experimenting with neighboring countries and partners to scale up a specific idea or project. Smaller markets are indeed vital entry points into a larger, more connected European capital market. And there should be no losers. We all will gain from a more efficient, integrated, deeper European capital market. So allow me to briefly walk you through our plan for a Savings and Investments Union. Europeans are among the world's best savers, yet most of them do not have an effective way of channeling that capital in a productive way. Instead, over 10 trillion euros sit in low-yield deposits while businesses face urgent financing needs. On the other hand, despite Europe's abundance of innovators, obstacles to securing investment within the Union are driving entrepreneurs to look for opportunities in other markets. I have been told of frequent examples in my country visits. The Savings and Investments Union seeks to bridge this gap, which is especially detrimental in key areas like digital innovation, climate transition, and defense. A competitive and integrated financial sector will lower costs and increase choice for citizens, ensuring their savings can be turned into productive investments. And we must build an effective network of integrated, interoperable markets that ensures access to deep pools of liquidity across the EU. Our SIU strategy has 4 pillars, covering citizens and savings, investment and financing, integration and scale, and efficient supervision. Let me say just a few words on each of these. We will take action to make investing in the EU easier and more beneficial for our citizens. To do this, we need to empower Europeans with the right tools to make good financial decisions. That is the aim of the financial literacy strategy we will be putting forward in a couple of months to help our citizens understand the risks, but also the advantages of investing in capital markets. There are some very good examples in Europe as well as internationally, and we can learn from and build upon those. Also drawing on best practices, we aim to create a savings and investments account blueprint for all Europeans to benefit from, looking at tax incentives too. Pensions are an extremely important part of our plan, as they are key to boosting investment in Europe and to provide quality retirement for citizens. We will therefore work with the member states on developing their own supplementary pension sectors. There are already good practices in Europe with very positive outcomes for citizens, but for too many member states, that is still not the case. On investment and financing, we will be working to make it easier for companies to access diversified sources of finance, including cross-border. We aim to bring institutional investors more into play for our European companies, including through venture capital, private equity, and infrastructure investments. We will engage with our financing partners and development banks to design and tailor financing programs to the needs of our companies. We will also revise the legislation on European venture capital funds label. This will help to facilitate equity financing for our high-tech and innovative companies. And we will review the EU rules on securitization, including prudential requirements for banks and insurers, as this will free up lending capacity, allowing investors to diversify exposures to new asset classes and, in effect, better support companies. Looking at integration and scale, we must ensure that our markets operate efficiently and remain resilient to shocks. Too often, European firms are unable to enjoy the scale and synergies of the single market, and this is a competitive disadvantage. We will be bringing bold proposals to break down barriers that hold back cross-border operations of market infrastructures, asset management, and fund distribution. Barriers exist in various forms. They are economic, legal, technical, operational, behavioral, and supervisory. We recently launched a questionnaire that will help gather the practical information we need to accurately calibrate our action. Removing barriers will help financial players gain scale across the EU and lower costs for businesses and citizens alike. On supervision, in essence, what we need is to ensure equal treatment for all financial market actors, wherever they operate in the EU. We have a single rule book, but often rules are applied differently by supervisors and other agents. This can be down to some authorities' legitimate concerns about the financial system's safety, but it can simply be protectionism of national markets and national players, and it often is. We surely need better supervisory convergence and more joined-up actions for all the authorities involved. Convergence tools and powers need to be more effective, and we must get rid of divergent national practices that fragment the market, be it at the level of national legislation or national actions. Where regulatory integration is more advanced, or where we have large EU cross-border players, EU-level supervision is the right approach. We can all gain from a more centralized view and assessment of certain areas in the financial sector. So for a few sectors, we will propose legislation to unify oversight and bring key supervisory tasks to the EU level. Again, we will look at the evidence we are collecting to make a precise assessment and come up with proposals by year-end. I've also been repeating that the Savings and Investments Union is a sector-agnostic tool to boost European competitiveness, which it is. But looking at how important defense and security is for Europe and how it is on top of everyone's minds in Central and Eastern Europe, I would like to highlight how the Savings and Investments Union can impact, in particular, the defense sector. The defense sector is a top priority for the Commission, as highlighted in the Rearm Europe plan. That requires a clear pipeline of projects and clear public funding signals. The Commission's white paper on defense gives us those signals. In addition, we have to unlock access to private finance for these companies, and banks and institutional investors must also consider investing in the defense sector. Some are already shifting that way, and I have seen promising signals. There is a growing shift in mindset on defense investing. Defense is a critical public good, now more than ever. and there is a clear business case for investing in defense as well. Besides, the benefits for innovation and economic growth stemming from the defense industry are undeniable. And the European Commission has clarified that the EU's sustainable finance framework is fully consistent with the EU's efforts to enhance the defense industry's access to finance and investment. And to conclude, I'd say that the advantages of a deep, competitive, efficient single market for financial services can perhaps be best appreciated by business representatives. But everyone stands to gain. Investors, market players, and member states, small and large, irrespective of where in Europe they are located. To achieve it, we all have a role to play, be it by removing barriers, be it by sharing best practices and discuss among coalitions of the willing, be it by smoothing retail investors' access with fair and easy solutions. The EU single market is our strongest asset. The Savings and Investments Union aims to ensure our single market in finance is indeed single and open for business. Thank you.
Well, Commissioner, thank you very much for that overview of, I think, really a very ambitious agenda that you outlined this morning, and I think that we've all benefited from. You stated in March that Europe's economy is underperforming, and you've made the Savings and Investment Union a keystone component of your tenure. You believe this will help address the investment needs of a number of priority areas. So you talked about the digital economy, climate change and social transition goals, as well as security and defense investment, which I thought was a terrific way that you pinpointed it as a critical public good in your remarks this morning. My question is, how do you think about prioritizing these areas? Are they at odds with one another, or is there enough juice in your mind for financing to go around?
Thank you. I would say that they are not competing because we do have a lot of idle resources in Europe. Our problem in Europe is not lack of money. We have other problems. That is not one of them. So we have enough resources. If we give people, namely retail investors, the right opportunities to invest, people will find these opportunities. As I said, this is a sector agnostic project. So we are not telling people where they should invest their money, not at all. It's a completely individual decision, as it always was. But we think that there are very good business cases in some of these identified priorities, namely on defense. The defense industry, you can see the valuation of those companies going up. You could see not long ago the first ETF on the European defense sector. So the market is already seeing that this is a good business case. There is a good investment opportunity there. So I think that the money will naturally flow to the business cases. Our intention at the European Commission is to put forward several plans. Obviously, this is just about financing, but there are many others in the competitiveness compacts, and those others which are directed to stimulate industry investment, to facilitate the climate transition. All those projects will create good business cases. The intention or the aim of the Savings and Investments Union is to facilitate private financing to go into these projects. But we are not directing anyone's money into any particular sector. People will continue to be able to invest in whatever they want. We will just act providing incentives as policymakers always do, and people are free to follow or not.
Thank you. It's definitely, it's about marrying the savings of Europeans, which we know is a hallmark for many nations, as well as the thirst for funding in key industries. You've taken on this extremely important portfolio, I think, at a critical time, but one that has significant obstacles that are still in place that you've talked about. You've mentioned recently Europe being complacent, and you've criticized some entrenched interests which have sought to preserve the status quo, as well as the fragmented decision-making in Europe. How do you see the early efforts to take on these interests and shrink the size of the complex of infrastructure of the financial markets in Europe?
Well, we see a lot of political will, which is something I sense is relatively new. As you heard from the description of my, of my CV, I have already been involved in this in the past, in the setup of the banking union in the very beginning, so immediately after the great financial crisis and the first efforts for the capital markets union. And there was never really a political will strong enough to push this forward because it's difficult. It is difficult to align tax incentives. It is difficult to align legislation. It is difficult to say that your national relevant player who actually enjoys a very comfortable position in your national market may actually be challenged by the competition and by a different setting. This is difficult politically. But I think now everyone realizes how important it is to actually put our resources to work. We, as I keep saying, what we need more than anything is a change in our mindset. We Europeans are no longer competing against each other, or we shouldn't be. We are competing with those outside Europe. We know who our competitors are in the global stage. And in order for us to be competitive at that scale, we also need to be big. And capital markets need to be big. It is one of those things that you cannot be efficient if you're small. We need big, liquid, deep capital markets. And today we have technological solutions that actually allows us to achieve that without moving the stock exchanges to some of the countries, which was always a difficult topic for discussion around Europe, where it would be located. It doesn't, physically, nothing has to move. We just need to make sure that our markets are interoperable. So this is perfectly compatible, having local and regional dynamic markets with a bigger European capital market. So whatever the entry point is, we can see the whole pool of liquidity, the whole pool of opportunities across Europe, and that is the vision. Obviously, this is going to take time, and that will require harmonizing many different aspects. We don't even have a single definition of shareholder in Europe. So there's a lot of work to be done in harmonizing this. But as long as there is political will, that should be feasible. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of compromise. But compromise should be always focused on what are we trying to achieve and not just compromise for the sake of compromise, because this is just the minimum common denominator and clearly is not good enough. So we need to be more ambitious on how we compromise, and there will be some giving in. That's actually, I think, what compromise means. Some people will give in on some things, but in the end, we will all benefit. Again, it is a difficult project. It requires will and persistence and work from many different players, including the private side. There are lots of issues which need to be addressed at central level or even at national authorities level, but the market participants also should play a role. They should embrace competition, embrace openness, and engage in facilitating all the projects, namely with retail investors, addressing some of the issues we know exist on competition with retail investors. It is actually a joint effort. If we all put our minds together, we can deliver what I believe could be an incredibly competitive market with lots of funds and clearly the ability to finance all our priorities without having to make the very difficult choices that sometimes people put, which is a topic for public finances, which is not in my portfolio, so I'll skip that one.
Well, I think that that's a terrific note to end on. I love the symmetry that I'm sitting here thinking about. A Portuguese commissioner, Central and Eastern Europe. This is the two real growth engines right now of the European Union, where we're seeing some of the strongest growth in the economy. So thank you for addressing these extremely important topics with us around financing these important needs in the EU, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
To make sure that our next guest is in the room. Thank you. Just 2 seconds. Excellent. Thank you. Very good. So thank you to the Commissioner for an extremely important and timely opening to our conversation today. I can see that we are delighted to welcome the Vice Governor of the Bank of Serbia, Ana Ivikovic, here to Hudson Institute. The Vice Governor is a graduate of the Faculty of Economics of Belgrade University, Department of Finance, Banking, and Insurance, earning a master's degree in the Department of Monetary Banking and Financial Management, as well as a PhD with the thesis, The Central Bank Impact on the Functioning and Development of the Money Market. Governor Ivikovic has worked at the Research and Development Department of Beogradska Banka. She joined the National Bank of Serbia in 2002 and has since held various posts, including those of an advisor at the National Foreign Exchange Department, General Manager of the Financial Stability Department, and General Manager of the Economic Research and Statistics Department. She was appointed Vice Governor in September in 2018. In that role, she has reported on international practice in various fields and has participated in the preparation, exchange, and presentation of strategic documents in the process of Serbia's accession to the European Union. She has served as Vice Governor of the National Bank of Serbia since September in 2018, and at the Governor's proposal in September of 2021, she was reappointed by the National Assembly for a 6-year term of office. Madam Governor, welcome to Hudson.
Before I start, one important correction. I'm not governor, I'm vice governor, Ana Ivkovic. Yes, so good afternoon. So I want to thank the organizers, the Hudson Institute for hosting today's event and the PPF Group for inviting us, for inviting my country, my Serbia. Madam Governor had a meeting that was unavoidable, so she is sending her warm regards. Her address would be a piece of art, that I can tell. And I'm truly sorry that you're not able to hear nor to see her. Her remarks are always the one to be remembered and the one to be talked about. For me, as you could hear, I'm more of a data person, but I assure you that I'm a central banker in my heart, but especially in my mind for about the quarter of century. And I have great respect for people running my country, so namely our president, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, and our governor, Jorgovanka Tabaković, for them personally and for everything they've done for my country, for my Serbia. I will now continue with the definition of the partnership that I support. This is how it goes. The transatlantic bond has been one of the most significant partnerships in the modern history, rooted in shared values such as democracy, peace, the rule of law, and economic development. In the past, we had great inflation. Then we had great moderation. Now we are in the decade of great volatility, but also great power competition, as many of you have spoken and wrote about. But we were also given a great mandate, and it is a very important one. It is to be the guardian of stability. So be it price stability, be it financial stability, be it political stability, it simply doesn't matter because they are all interconnected. And when we are speaking about the national security and economic engine, everything does matters. I have heard politicians saying that is only thing that counts is speed. Maybe, but most probably not, especially not in the economy. The speed does not mean a wise and right decision always. What we need are well-measured investments. We need innovation, we need patience, trust, knowledge, and strong partnerships. Now turning to my country, to my Serbia, I'm proud that my country has undergone a remarkable economic transformation over the past decade, or to be precise, starting from 2012. And this is recognized by investors from all over the world. So it does not come as a surprise that last year we have been awarded by the investment grade in October by the S&P rating agency. And I will quote what they said when they were assessing Serbia. So first, Serbia has strong management of the country. Second, Serbia has credible macroeconomic policy framework. Third, Serbia has prudent fiscal and monetary policy. The last one, not the least one, Serbia has a strong growth and FDI outcomes, but also strong growth and FDI prospects. We are also recognized then by the successful fiscal consolidation that our president, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, undertook back in 2014, so more than 10 years ago, bringing fiscal indicators to a very comfort zone during the course of several years. But like everywhere, consolidation was socially hard to be implemented, or to say it was not popular. But economically, it was by no means the urgent situation back then. But people in Serbia trusted our president, and this now pays the dividend, as we now have fiscal space for huge capital investments in many key areas. So we have high but sustainable rise in wages and pensions, and high and sustainable rise in living standards of our people. Serbia is also recognized and by credible monetary policy that is implemented by the National Bank of Serbia, to name our Madam Governor, Jorgovanka Tabaković. This is evidenced by the resolved inflation that was on average, or I may say prior to 2012, we had completely different countries. So we had huge and volatile inflation. We used to have hyperinflation. We had the twin deficit. We had the rising unemployment. Since 2012, we call it the turning point. Serbia is the country with the inflation that has been resolved on the average 12% until the last global inflation shock. So we are also recognized for the stable local currency of our dinar over the euro, and record FX reserves, including very high level of the gold reserves. So they're now around 50% of our FX reserves. Our economic program is supported also by the new 3-year policy coordination instrument that we signed with the IMF in December last year. This is advisory, non-financial instrument. We didn't go with financial instrument, because we are liquid and we don't need financing from the IMF, but they are our quite reliable partner. Also in Serbia, government capital investments have been exceeding 7% of the GDP for many years. So with them, we significantly improve business condition, business environment, but also the quality of life. And despite such large capex, our fiscal deficit is around 2% of GDP, and public debt to GDP ratio around 45%. You know that it is very good fiscal metrics. And we are doing much better compared to the countries with the same investment grade. Now we are continuing with the implementation of large number of infrastructure projects under the program that we call Leap into the Future Expo 2027, or Leap into the Future Serbia 2027. So we believe that it will further modernize our infrastructure. So Belgrade will be the center of education, of innovation and culture in 2027. And we invite everyone to come to Serbia to be part of this special event that we symbolically named Play for Humanity. With all this, it also does not come as a surprise that we are a leading destination for foreign direct investments in the region of Western Balkans. So around 60% of total FDIs that are channeled to Western Balkans are going to Serbia. The advantage of Serbia, for which we are also globally recognized by investors, but also appraised by rating agencies, is the policy of diversification. So if I'm to give the face to such policy, then it would be our president, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, because he launched the Open Balkan Initiative, the Open Balkan Project, recognizing the importance of regional cooperation, but also of general concept of cooperation based on mutual interests. We have a large number of signed international agreements for free or special conditions exports. The FDIs that are channeled to Serbia are quite diversified. So in terms of the countries they are coming, in terms of the sectors they are going, and in terms of the projects, because a very large number of small projects is financed by the FDIs. They are mostly channeled to the export-oriented sector, and this is supporting our export to remain resilient to this period of high global uncertainty that we are all in. Companies from all over the world have recognized Serbia as a country offering a stable macroeconomic and political environment with very high growth rates, new infrastructure, well-educated workforce, and competitive operating costs. Importantly to add, and as a confirmation of everything that has been done, Serbia has had an average growth rate of 4.6% over the course of 4 years, so 2021, 2024, with a projected medium-term growth rate of 4%, but we believe our projections are showing that we could do better, around 4.5% in the medium term. All of this makes us a good and reliable partner for everyone. Of course, quite naturally and geographically determined, the European Union is our key trading but also financial partner. But our economic cooperation with the United States is also continuously growing. Last year, exports of ICT services to the US accounted for 27% of our total export of services, and this is fast-growing sector. I can give two data to show how fast it is growing. So if we compare it to 2012, export of our ICT industry is higher by 11 times. Employment in this sector, twice higher. So Serbia is part of the Central and Eastern European region, and to the extent that the region grows, it can only be better for us. This region is economic engine of Europe. If we judge based on the data from the past 5 years, so from 2020 to 2024, the countries of this region, including Serbia, have demonstrated significant resilience and much needed agility that many of us are talking about today as must-have. So starting from COVID-19 pandemic to the energy crisis and everything that followed. This is supported by the fact that the average economic growth rate in most Central and Southeast European countries over the past 5 years has been twice as high as the average growth rate in the Euro area. As we are at the spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank here in Washington, D.C., I would like to remind of the goals of multilateralism. It is to encourage the expansion of trade and economic growth, and to discourage policies that would harm prosperity. For this, all member countries, so all 191 countries, must collaborate with each other. And I will conclude with a quote that is reminding us from the walls of Thomas Jefferson Memorial that I like very much, and I visit it twice a year. So here it goes. With a change in circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. And this is exactly what we were and what we are doing in Serbia, guided by our president, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić. So being agile, always believing in people, in common sense, and in the power of partnership, as we are all sharing almost the same challenges, but also the same opportunities. We are all together in this new era, how you put it, and we can make it to be the great era. So I'm also inviting you to look for the investor presentation that we publish at the National Bank of Serbia site once a month, so you can find here the latest current macroeconomic developments and also expected macroeconomic trends. With that, I thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes, of course.
Well, thank you very much for that. Those terrific remarks. And you focus quite a bit on the opportunities for the Serbian economy across the next 5 years. I wondered if you could maybe just touch on some of the challenges that you see and some of the steps that you think can be implemented to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I've been talking about the opportunities because we have meetings with investors quite often, so almost on a daily basis. Maybe not on a daily basis, but at least once a week. So we are told that Serbia today and Serbia prior to 2012 is completely different country, like we are living in a different country, and I explained why. But still there are some challenges. We are small and open economy, and I can speak about shortly about 3 challenges. One is automotive industry. I do believe that each country today has this problem and this challenge. FDIs in Serbia were channeled to the auto cluster strongly. So this auto cluster has the rise of export for about 4 times compared to 2020. So it has the pretty dynamic export. What we have seen last year is the slowdown. So the export of auto clusters, so not just the cars, but also the batteries, the electronic conductors, also the tires, slowdown 4.7%. We related to our trading partner slowdown when it comes to the economic growth. So this is one of the challenge. What we see as something that will push up our auto industry is the fact that in February we have started the special Stellantis company in Kragujevac. So electric vehicle, but also we will go with the hybrid model till the end of the last year. So I'm not an expert in the automobile industry. I prefer hybrids at this moment more than electric cars, but nevertheless, we do believe that this will push our auto sector. But also what we are seeing is that the FDIs are still continuing to the auto sector here in Serbia, and they are, as I said, diversified by countries and regions. So still they are. The second challenge I also believe that we all share is the energy security. So this is something where our diversification policy that I mentioned and imposed by our president, Mr. Vučić, has given very good results because we are coordinating with many countries to have the good and stable supply of the energy. And the third one is, I believe that we have been talking about that one for almost 10 years on our also Kopaonik Business Forum, which is equal to the Davos. It is the demographic factors and aging of population, but now especially how the AI will tackle changes at the labor market. So we have seen some analyses that AI will, of course, boost the productivity. So net gains we will see at the workplaces. So many will be opened, less will be closed, but we don't know. And this is really a huge challenge that we have to tackle together. Another IMF, I believe, last year analysis was that the artificial intelligence can boost the global growth by 0.8 percentage points, but only if applied properly. So this is where I see this challenge that is huge, that is global. So not regional, not Serbia, and it is global. And just to invite you from this place to come to Serbia, the country of great people, the country of great food, but the country with a very good infrastructure, with strong growth rates, and with very good and strong leadership, but above all, stable macroeconomic conditions you will find there. So you are all invited to come to invest in Serbia, if not invest, then to visit us and to see our beautiful country. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Governor, for being here. It was terrific to have a perspective from Belgrade to start off our conversation today. For our next conversation, please allow me to introduce Peter Rao, the Director of the Center on Europe and Eurasia and Senior Fellow here at Hudson Institute. Peter is really the ticking heart of the center, and I think on this side of the Atlantic, perhaps no one knows Germany and the Central Europe region better than him. So I would invite Peter to the stage. Yep. You're up. And secondly, joining him on stage is Dr. Lars Hendrik Roller, founder and chair of the Berlin Global Dialogue and a professor of economics at ESMT Berlin. He previously served as chief economic advisor to former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, as well as G7 and G20 Sherpa. Prior to that, Dr. Roller was chief competition economist at the European Commission. Throughout his academic career, he taught at INSEAD, New York University, Stanford University, and the Norwegian School of Economics and Business Administration. So with that, gentlemen, I will turn over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. It's a real pleasure to see all of you. As you know, and as Dan has expressed, this is something of a crown jewel event for the Europe operation here at Hudson. And I'm delighted to have such a strong economist sitting to my left to take us through the finer points of economic theory. I'm joking, we won't bore you all. Instead, let's start with politics and what is in the news, which is that Germany is on the cusp of forming a new government, or the government is formed, but it is not yet inaugurated. And given your background and where you sit, which is in Berlin, where you run the Berlin Global Dialogue, tell us a little bit about what we can expect and a little bit maybe about the incoming Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who is a known commodity in Washington, but maybe not to everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here, Peter. Also, thank you for the invitation. Very nice to be here to speak in such a distinguished crowd. So I think on the German government, it's not in power yet. I think I know we have the vote on May 6, where the chancellor has to get elected by the German parliament. So the chancellor doesn't get elected by the people, it gets directed by the parliament. He has a majority in parliament, provided that the parties which are going to vote for him in parliament can agree on the so-called coalition contract, which is about 150 pages. We've done this, I've been part of that 4 times. It's a very long contract. You can wonder about the logic of doing such a thing. Because if you look at the past, most of the coalition contracts actually became pretty obsolete is the wrong word, but difficult because things happen in the world. So they have a contract which has been criticized by some, but others have said it's a good basis to get Germany going again. Because Germany does have lots of challenges ahead. And provided that now the parties which are running votes will agree on the coalition contract, this is going on right now, then on the 6th of May, Merz will be voted to chancellor. Then he's chancellor for 4 years, and he cannot really be unearthed. So there's no way for parliament to get rid of a chancellor. We did that in our constitution because of the Weimar Republic. We wanted stability, so the chancellor has a lot of power. So he's a chancellor for 4 years. But he needs, of course, a majority in government to get any laws passed. So he would be then chancellor after 6. Then he can appoint his ministers, and then we could get going and start implementing the government. So I think it looks pretty good. Now the question is sort of who is running which ministry, which is a bit boring for you, but I guess the finance ministry is a very important one. This is going to the Social Democrats. And then we're going to get going. Of course, the world is not waiting for Germany. This is one reason why it actually did happen pretty quickly. We have last time, in the one before that, in 2017, it took us 6 months to form a government with Merkel. So they did this actually pretty good and pretty fast. And let's see what happens.
And this government essentially collapsed around the time of the American elections. So it is an auspicious or an interesting timing, I would add. You're right, it might be a little boring to get into the specific ministries, but tell us about Merz the man a bit, since he will be coming to Washington. He will be the face of Germany for many Americans, and he's the one who will be interacting with our president, President Trump.
He's very pro-European, he's very transatlantic. He was the chairman of BlackRock, Germany, the supervisory board chairman, where I was also recently. He's been out of politics for a while. So this is always the problem. in Germany, it's unlike America. The United States has a completely different system that normally these leaders know how to run a government. So Scholz was finance minister, and he's been in government all along. So Merz is somebody a bit like a US president. He's been in parliament until 2001 or 2, which is when Merkel sort of stopped him. And then he was out of government for 20 years, and now he's coming back in. And the people around him are also relatively new. So there's the party that states the Generalsekretär in German, we say, the leader of the secretary of the party, Carsten Linnemann. He's also not really been in government. Thorsten Frey, he's the other strong man in the party. He will probably be the chief of staff of the chancellor. He's also not really been in government. They've been in parliament, but they've not been in government. And I think one lesson I can tell you, as somebody who's been there for 10 years, being in parliament and being in government and running the ministries and getting things done is very different. So on the other hand, he comes with a fresh look. He is sort of pro-economics. He's what Germany needs at this point. He's very transatlantic. He's been relatively negative on, or de-risking on China, let me put it that way. It's a big debate in Germany right now, especially the situation over here, how we should position ourselves. And the most important thing, I think this is what the conference is also about, is the powerhouse of Central and Eastern Europe, which I think is true. Growth is higher in Central and Eastern Europe. There are many advantages to defense is a big issue there. He's pro-European. So Merz has actually started off his career as a member of the European Parliament. So he really believes in Europe, and I agree completely with that, to all these problems which we're looking at in the world. To the extent that we can manage it, to the extent that we can strengthen our European economic and social and defense ties, I think that's the answer to everything. And he stands for that. And last point, Macron, somebody we know very well, Emmanuel Macron, who used to be actually a colleague of mine. He was a Sherpa of Hollande.
What happened to him?
Yeah.
Did he ever amount to
It was very funny, the first meeting Hollande and Chancellor had when he was young French president, very impressive guy. I was sitting next to the Chancellor in the cabinet room, and she looked at me, don't you get any wrong ideas? Because he really went and became a, so I basically stayed in the same job for 10 years, and he had a steep career, became president. And him and Scholz it is said, didn't work very well. I know a lot of stories, but I won't say this publicly. But Merz and him are apparently getting very much along. They actually met at the Berlin Global Dialogue also last year for one of the first times. But then also it's not only the chemistry between leaders, which of course is very important. Don't have to tell you this here. But it's also the issues. And many of the issues, for example, on defense, on trade, Mercosur, even on nuclear, which divided Germany and France in the past, are now much more united. So my hope is that this powerhouse, it will never be like it was under de Gaulle and Kohl or something like that, or Adenauer and Kohl, but this powerhouse of Germany and France pushing Europe forward is really necessary. I can tell you that from many, many years of meeting and preparing these meetings. My hope is that that will come back. Well, so and all of that is actually good news.
And as an opening bit, I think Friedrich Merz has promised in his first day as chancellor to travel to both Warsaw and Paris, or
on
at
the
least
7th. On the 7th.
On the 7th. Well,
6 is the vote, 7th. He wants to do it on the same day.
It's rather biblical. In 7 days, he will have made it to Warsaw. And
you
Paris.
said that, okay, yes. So.
Let me ask you about the German economy, because this is a conference on Central and Eastern Europe, and the reason why we have an esteemed German economist on stage is because Germany's economy is the powerhouse, the engine, the dominant player in the region writ large. There's been a lot of reporting over the months and years that the German economy has faced some headwinds. I don't know whether or not you agree with that assessment, but I see you nodding. So let me ask you, do you consider those economic headwinds to be cyclical kind of dynamics, or do you think they're more structural factors at work?
Definitely structural. And the Merkel years have been blamed, or she has been blamed heavily for not having done the right things, which is a fair point. For example, more innovation, more infrastructure investment, more public spending, because we had that very tough debt break, which I still think has its merit, by the way. We can go into that. They just relaxed that in the current government did, so they have a lot more money now. On defense, I would agree. So we didn't do our homeworks before, but it's very difficult. This is maybe philosophical now, also on Ukraine, on Nord Stream 2, on many issues where we are correctly criticized for not having done perhaps the right thing. First of all, it's very difficult to predict everything because so many things can happen every day and you never know what is going to happen. It's not trying to defend the situation, it's trying to explain how things are when you're in the machine room. It's not that easy to predict what happens tomorrow. Think about what's happening here. It's very difficult to predict. And the other thing also, it's when the country is doing well. I mean, German growth rates over the Merkel years have been, let me not be wrong, be comparable to the United States. So we were not much less dynamic, maybe not if you look at digitalization, but as a whole economy. The rest of Europe was lagging behind. We had, the crisis in Southern Europe. So when the country is doing well, it's very difficult to do reforms. I mean, this is an old argument, but I've said many times we need to do that and that and that to lower corporate taxes. We have the highest corporate tax rates in Europe. They're now proposing some lowering that corporate tax rate, but in 28. In 28 by 1 percentage point. That's what the new government is proposing. So this is part of the criticism. Is that really going to create a lot of dynamicism? 1% in 28. So we didn't do much, and we did a lot of social programs. We had the Americans to protect us. We had the Russians to give us cheap energy. We had a big market in China. So all of that is changing. So it's structural. But it's very difficult to do something if the country is actually doing very well. When it's not going well, this is the argument of an opportunity. Right now, Europe is under a lot of pressure from the East and from the West, in a way, by the way. One from the economically, and you can buy some of these arguments the Americans are making. I don't think tariffs is the answer, by the way, to these problems, but that's a different story. And of course, from the East, we're having a war, an aggressor, who is maybe not going to stop at Ukraine if he wins that war. That's what most military people are telling me. So we're having a lot of issues there. And now is the time, and now it's politically possible to actually do some of these reforms. And I'm hopeful, I don't know what the commissioner exactly said, but the European Commission is very important that we need competitiveness and growth, something we should have done 15 years ago. Thank you very much. That didn't happen. I can explain why. But now we need to do it. And we need to speed up defense, beef up defense. And the question really is how fast we can do that and whether the political will in Europe is there. Or are people going to vote for parties? This is the danger, the frustration with democracy, also in my country, that if this government, this German government and this European Commission, Mrs. Albuquerque, are not going to succeed, then people are they want their problem solved. They just want their problem solved. They don't want big stories or great theories. They want their problem solved, and then it's not going to be a good solution. So my point is, on the German economy and the European economy, I think the point always in politics is being able to do something. Whether you're right or wrong actually is not always important. You have to do something. And my hope is that things are getting obviously recognized by most people in the street that we need to do something and that they will follow up. And the German government is going to be instrumental in that. So I will, from the outside, I'm not part of the German government anymore, I've done it long enough, to really support that Friedrich Merz is going to succeed in making Germany again a strong country.
Make Germany great again. You almost said it.
There's mega, make Europe
great again. So tell me a little bit then about, in this coalition agreement, these 150 pages that you mentioned at the outset, what are the components that the coalition negotiators have seized upon to help push forward these reforms? Or if you don't see them in the coalition agreement, what would Henrik Ola say are the necessary components to make?
But the question is, have they done enough? I think they've done on the economic policy, they've done tax reform, corporate tax reform. They also done a 30% Abschreibung. How do you say this in English?
Write-offs.
Write-offs, accounting write-offs, 30% for 3 years. So triggering investment. They want to lower energy prices, but they want to do it by, in a way, lowering energy taxes, lowering network charges, because the networks in Germany, because we're going towards renewables, and there's a lot of resistance toward these infrastructures. It takes too long and it's very expensive. Can talk a lot about the energy change in Germany, whether this is smart or not smart, but it's certainly expensive. And this is going to be lumped onto the energy price, that cost of the building of the grid. Okay, it's all not paid through taxes, but it's paid through levies on prices. So they want to lower all of that. All of that means you're going to have money in the budget. They have money in the budget because they relaxed the debt brake. You know, this German debt brake is 0.34% structural deficit. So it goes up or down depending how the economy is going annually. And they've exempted that for defense spending. So we can now borrow as much money on defense. It's not under the debt brake. As much as we can, and we generated a 500 billion so-called infrastructure fund, which is outside the normal budget, which will allow us to fund roads, infrastructure, even schools, and this kind of thing, which has been neglected in Germany. So energy prices down, and the big thing is they want to reduce regulation or bureaucracy, and this is true. We actually did. We did several deregulation packages. You know, deregulation and regulation, when you look at it, probably also all these rules and regulations are there for a good reason. They're protecting people also. For example, if you want to build an airport, you have abilities to stop it as a private citizen. There are environmental, climate regulations, sustainability regulations. There's a lot of that. And Germans, Americans are much more pragmatic, if I may say so. Two of my kids are Americans, by the way. The dad is not, but the kids are. And your Germans are, like always, very legal planning, ex ante regulatory issues before you start something. You want to make sure all the risks are eliminated. This is good in a society which is stable and rule of law, but if you need to take some risks, or if the world is changing dramatically, that kind of attitude is not a very good one. So a lot of regulation, and they want to get rid of that. But this would go into all kinds. And then there's the social part, which is a big issue. Our pension system, our labor insurance system, all of that is said to be very generous. We've had a good country. We've had growth. We spend the money on social issues, and we didn't maybe do the things we should have done. Well, we need to be able to do that. And we have one good thing we did, if I may say so, and the Merkel and Schäuble was the famous finance minister who died, great European, is we had our fiscal deficit house in order. If you look at this country, I'm not commenting on that, but you can get worried about it. But this is your debate. We actually do.
And your
have
kids will have to pay for it.
They can always go back to Germany, so that's not. They have dual citizenship. I'm not sure they want to. They love it here. But we have the money now to actually do some of the things we should do and we need to do.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the changing landscape of Europe and the changing German economy. One, I think, principal factor that powered Germany's economy, amongst others, was the relatively inexpensive labor costs of Central and Eastern Europe. But as those economies have grown, one thinks of, for example, what's often referred to as the European tiger now in Poland, labor costs have gone up. How do you think of, or what does the future interaction look like between Germany and, say, these Bucharest 9 states on the eastern, what is now the eastern flank of NATO and the European Union? What does the future economic interaction look like in your mind? Is it a manufacturing supply chain still the way it once was? Is that changing?
Yeah, I think it's I don't think, by the way, that Germany's comparative advantage or competitive advantage was because of cheap labor costs. I think we did have an advantage. We outsourced a lot of our automobile supply chains to Slovakia and Poland and other countries. And we have a lot of industrial links between Eastern Europe and Germany, and I think that is likely to continue. But it's not cheap labor. I think it is more value added and quality. And in these segments like automobile, even though we're being challenged by others, including China, for example, we have had a very good product. So I think that this relationship is likely to happen. I think Eastern Europe, when I was thinking about coming here, I mean, Eastern Europe is, on the one hand, it's got, I think, double the growth of Western Europe. If you look at the Draghi report, it really applies to a large extent about Western Europe and not so much about Eastern Europe. I'm advising Edi Rama, who's the Prime Minister of Albania, who wants to get into the EU. They have to basically do all the regulatory rules of the EU to apply to their country. And this is all, if you want, Western European stuff. And I think it's not necessarily such a good thing, all of that for the economy. So I think on regulatory issues, on growth issues, there is a lot of benefit from Eastern Europe, and I think we should use that. Now comes the military part. There's some kind of Weimar Republic. Weimar Triangle, sorry about that, but that's where the name comes from. This is France, Germany, and Poland. And this is why he's going to Poland, by the way, also on the 7th, I assume, Friedrich Merz, if he's the chancellor. So I think we need to build on the defense side much more links. There is quite a bit of defensive capabilities actually in Eastern Europe, even from the enlargement countries. If you think about the Baltics, this is of course related to Serbia also, what happens to the Baltics and the admissions process into the EU. So I think we should strengthen those, but what I was going to say is that European unity is important. We don't want Eastern Europe not to be part of Europe on all of these policy issues. I think on trade, on defense, and on many issues, I think there is always a danger that Europe is divided by others, by the way, not by you, but by other countries, as even China. They had the 16+1 format, where they basically united Eastern Europe with China. They had the summit, which we didn't like at all. I think it's been stopped in the meantime.
I think it made it to 17+1, and now it's 14+1 and de facto frozen.
Yeah, so that's good. Germany never liked that. So I think the point is, yes, they have their advantages. We should work with them, but we should keep Europe united. Europe then has the other issues. Do we do a coalition of the willing? I think there's a meeting very soon again on Ukraine of the coalition of the willing. So this is Macron's idea, who always said, Germans always wanted the Europe to keep together, but since it's unanimity, it's very difficult to get certain things done. So Macron's idea was very often, let's have a subgroup of countries moving forward. By the way, we already have that in Schengen, we have that in the Euro. It's a subgroup of countries. And Germany was always keep Europe together. And I think that this is a debate which we may want to have again. If we can't agree, think about Hungary and sanctions against Russia. It's another good example. If we can't agree on certain important strategic things of national European security, should we have a subgroup of countries going ahead? Ukraine is another one, or not. And the other issue which is important is, should we enlarge Europe? Should we have other countries joining? This is the Balkans and other countries which are coming in. So, but the main point is, so this is a debate we've been having for 10 or 15 years. Germans have always been, let's keep Europe together, at least the previous governments. And I think this applies especially also to Eastern Europe. I think we should not look at Eastern Europe as a sub-region of Europe, at least me as a European. I think we should look at Europe as a whole. And we should also be positive about enlargement. I think this is important, and Serbia is playing a very important role in that one.
Let's go to the next set of developments or changes and talk about the German relationship with China, which is something you've thought long and hard about and worked on substantially.
I was afraid you're going to ask me that.
Well, then I'll just leave it open-ended. Tell me about the debate that's ongoing, to the extent it is, in Berlin about its relationship with China and the structure of the German-Chinese economy.
Well, I can't really speak about the German government because the new German government has to formulate that view. And I think if you look at the coalition contract, there's a chapter on foreign policy, which obviously probably the next foreign minister wrote. I don't know whether he will be that. Mr. Wadepool was, I think, chairing that subcommittee. He's a candidate for foreign minister. He's very good. And it's very transatlantic, you know, but this was also done 3 weeks ago or something. So I think Merz, in the meantime, has made other statements also about the US administration, if I'm not mistaken. But that's very transatlantic, and it's very much, looking at China as a competitor, and with de-risking will be further done. And initially said also at one point, if German companies invest in China, it's at their own risk. And so he has been rather maybe close to previous German governments, maybe even a bit harder, but I don't really know. My personal view is that...
I would just interject really quickly. I think if I read the coalition agreement correctly, it abandons this triptych definition of competitor, partner, and rival and hones in on the rivalry as a core feature of German-Chinese relations now, which I do think is at least a rhetorical shift. Maybe I'm overemphasizing it.
But we've had that all the time.
Okay.
Actually, we negotiated that with Xi, I think it was in Hollande still at the, we had these competitor, rival, and partner, I think, the four. And the question is always, in practice, what does it mean? The Chinese were very upset that we had that rival in there because that was a new thing at the time. At that time, it was relative, it was 17 or 18, so it's almost 8 years ago. And over time, you can ask, has one been more borne by the data than another one? I fail to see that. I think our relationship with China, our economic relationship with China has been relatively strong. I don't think investments have gone down. There's very little Chinese investment in Europe. There's a lot of investment in China from European companies. There's a lot of joint ventures in the in China. They've relaxed, by the way, the conditions on joint ventures. We wouldn't have majority joint ventures. We now can. I'm not saying it's a level playing field at all with China. I'm just saying they have been moving economically, not politically, at least over a few years opened up. We had this EU-China investment agreement, which never happened, which I think is a mistake, by the way. We did that in the last days of the Trump 1 administration, with the Biden administration coming in, not being happy about that we were doing this big deal with China.
Famous Jake Sullivan tweet.
Even though the US had done a big deal with China themselves on trade, and not really got the Europeans involved either, but okay. But that deal was never ratified. And probably it's still there. It's still there, which could be reopened any time. I'm not sure it has a chance. So anyway, so economics, so on that.
But isn't it meaningful that, or is it not meaningful, sorry to interrupt, but that Wadepool, the say not presumptive foreign minister, but certainly a candidate for the foreign ministry, helped negotiate that text rather than say the likely next economics or finance.
Who's the next economics?
I don't know. You tell me. We're just amongst friends here.
Nobody knows. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Wadepool, I think he was chairing that committee. I think there was, my interpretation is of the people who were on that committee, a lot of them are still very transatlantic and not opening up towards certainly China. That's my interpretation. This is public, what we're doing, right? So, but let's see what will happen. My personal view is that we should be pragmatic about this. So it's a bit more maybe what Merkel was doing. I think that we need to, our friends are clearly on this side of the Atlantic. We are democracies. We need to work with the West. But we also have economic interests in other parts of the world. And this is not only China, this also applies to India, this applies to Mercosur, which maybe will happen now.
Is that a done deal, Mercosur? Because you mentioned earlier points of agreements between Macron and Merz, and Mercosur was one of them. But I detected some disagreements there, maybe not.
No, I think it was unfortunate that the thing never, we actually finished it at the G20 in Buenos Aires. We even had champagne at that. And then it was never ratified. But that's spilled milk. So I think there's a good chance that the Europeans are now thinking about ratifying it. Let's see. But I'm also wondering about the Latin American side. I've heard that they may also be thinking about it, that, in this new world with lots of industrial policies, is this really to the advantage of Latin America? So, but I don't know. My hope would be that and this is an example, I think, where Europe needs to build its bridges around the world. And it doesn't have to be China, but it could be other countries as well. And then it gets into the question, where are we going with all of this? Where is the United States going in terms of multilateral cooperation and working with other countries? And this is not something we can decide. This is something you decide over here. But I think whatever you decide, we need to quickly take some action in Europe, which includes the economics and the defense, and maybe also building our relationships with others. This is, by the way, what the Berlin Global Dialogue is doing. It's a global forum. It's also lots of global south. And I did the G20 for 10 years. I was a Sherpa. I was running it as a Sherpa president in months. And I'm a big believer in, well, let me say it, multilateralism. I know this is dead. Certainly the way we've done it in the past, it's dead. But the problems are still there. And we need to think about how do we solve them. And I hope that Europe can make a contribution there.
Well, let's go at least to bilateralism, which is the transatlantic relationship. And
Yes.
let me ask you about the current state of the
Water.
American-European economic trade and investment relationship. Do you think President Trump has a point at all when he points to the large current account deficit in goods, or do you think that this is economic illiteracy, as some economists charge?
I think that the trade deficit is an economic number, which is something which we all look at as an imbalance. We basically also have that in Europe. I mean, Germany always had a big trade surplus, and we had imbalances procedures, and then we had measures of taking it out because it's an imbalance in the economy. I just don't think that tariffs is the answer to all of that. So, and also the other issues that in services, as you know, I mean, we've actually met with him in the White House. I was there, and we discussed that. When we were there, he didn't like Nord Stream 2. Had a point there. He didn't like the trade deficit. He didn't like we didn't spend much on defense. And we're doing most of that, I think, at this point. So I think that you mentioned it, there's a lot of capital which goes into the United States. We're funding we're doing a lot of investment, creating a lot of jobs. We have almost as much capital stock here as the trade imbalance is. We showed them all these graphs when we were there in the White House last time, but he's still fixated by this trade deficit.
Yeah, I mean,
And this argument that it relocates, first of all, you can ask yourselves, I mean, you're having this debate. I wouldn't follow it if I had to do in my country, that you need to, you're a service economy, and that's where all the value added is. And you want to rebuild an old world on manufacturing. I don't get it. Okay, I know you need manufacturing, and who am I to say, because we have a strong manufacturing, we like our manufacturing, but that's our comparative advantage. So if you do more one, you do less of the other. You can't do everything in the world. So if you want to do manufacturing, you do less services. I don't understand it. So this is one thing, and the other thing I don't understand is how it's not easy to relocate manufacturing to this country or to any country. It will take time, and it will also raise costs. And I think in the end, it's likely to lower growth and lower welfare in the world if you do that.
I've read a lot of reports about what are now these nascent negotiations between the U.S. and tariff countries. And there are, I think, at least some countries, I've read reports in the press that the Japanese are somewhat frustrated because there are different rationales put forward or different goals by the administration. But in the end, I think if we hone it down on one thing, it probably is the American trade deficit in goods. I think that's probably, it's my assumption, what motivates President Trump the most. Irrespective whether or not you think that's a good measure of healthy economics or not, what would you put on the table as positive steps we can take in the transatlantic alliance to try to address some of President Trump's concerns? Or is there a third policy option like cooperation on China policy that you think would be fruitful, that might help push us together and forward as partners and allies?
So on the first, I think that these, is it revenue, is it relocation, or is it just the good old trade deficit in products? I would agree with you if I read it correctly, but I only met him if it's the trade deficit, which also, in particular, one of his advisors has been hammering at.
Peter Navarro.
And he seems to be getting more influence. So what was your question again?
Well, it was what steps, irrespective of how you read the
The other thing is that,
else
you know,
would you
it's this
recommend?
attitude, I should be very careful as public, that, you know, we're now, so we hit you in the face with these tariffs. You are friends. It's also this transactional. I'm a man of policy. I'm a man of long run. You need your friends in the long run. You need credibility with your friends. You need to be predictable. I'm in that world. I'm a strong believer in policy rather than in transactions, even though transactions in the end, of course, are important. But they are a function of policy and not the other way around. Now you come and you want something from me, and tell me what you can give me. After I have done something which actually is not considered to be nice or acceptable even by all the standards we've been establishing by the United States since Second World War. And now you're there, and now you need to offer something. And let's see. Maybe they will offer, maybe buy more LNG. This is what I read in the papers. Maybe we'll side with you on China. This will all be costly to us. And the question is that part of our policy? So we can offer something. And then we don't even know if it's going to result in anything. So to me, a negotiation would be that it's a give and take on both sides. I think we are where we are. I think I can defend where we are. I don't think we've been unfair to the United States. I don't think the world has been to the disadvantage of the United States. I think there are areas, of course, and I think you have domestic issues. People have benefited, some people have lost from globalization. It's clearly the case. And it's a big issue. It's a big political issue, and you can do something about that. But I think it's a give and take. And the problem is, of course, and the fact is that this is by far the most powerful and strongest country in the world. We are completely dependent on the United States militarily, economically, to a large extent, and also in terms of secret information, you know, intelligence information, I'm told. I'm not an intelligence expert. So we have a lot of leverage. And the question is, you know, how do you use it intelligently? And so my point for you is that, yeah, we can offer LNGs, we can offer China there, we don't decide our trade balance. What are we going to do? We can spend more, we can increase domestic demand. That's what we're doing already. We're not the ones who are buying German cars, it's Americans who are buying German cars. We have non-tariff barriers, let me say that, because that comes up a lot as well. Or the VAT. You know, one of the, I don't know, you heard the story, is that it is said that you have a value, we have a different tax system than you do. And I think both have advantages and disadvantages. We can talk a lot about taxes in this country, by the way. Huh? I know that there's a big debate here. But we have a value-added tax, which is relatively high, 18%. Okay, and our tax base is generally higher because we have more spending on and more inefficiency, I'm sure, on public goods. And I like that, actually. That's one reason why I like to live in Europe, because I have that part of it, even though my two kids, I love America. So we have it, and now they say the VAT is actually a non-tariff barrier.
Right.
I don't get that point. Because it's not discriminatory. A trade barrier is if foreign companies are not paying it and domestic paying it and domestic companies. There's a discriminatory aspect. It's the whole idea behind trade. The VAT is paid by German companies just as much as by American. So when you start, and this is true for environmental standards, I agree, you may not like our non-hormone beef and chlor chicken and all the crazy European regulation. You may not like it, but it's borne by Europeans as much as it's borne by American companies. So I don't really see how it is the right of a foreign country to interfere in a domestic policy decision by another country based on a trade aspect, okay? And so I think that's, but of course, it sells very well here because these Europeans are all regulating and all the bureaucracy and taxing everything. And there's an element of truth to that. But it applies to Europeans, common agricultural policy. Yeah, that's actually discriminatory. The common agricultural policy actually is benefiting Europe, is subsidizing. This is different. This is discriminatory. Okay, it's subsidizing European agriculture and not allowing others to come in. But the VAT is paid by everybody. So it's a little philosophical question: is how much you want to interfere in domestic issues of other countries. And I think I've been saying too much already, but I think that there is, of course, a way to get together. And I know Mr. Šefčovič was here recently, and I think there's Mr. Trump, President Trump, I should say, yesterday said there will be a deal, or the day before when Meloni was here, 100% likely we will get a deal. So let's get a deal done. But I think we should also think beyond the deal, and we should really think about how we solve these big global issues like climate, development issues, security issues, and all of that. And
Yes. Well, as an Iowan, I had to mention CAP. But let me finish then and close on a meta question, since you sort of took us in that direction at the end about solving these grand challenges that face the world. Given what you said earlier about European,
it's a little bit demeaning that it's
No.
challenges that face the world. So.
No, I mean they are real challenges. But given what you said earlier about Europe's reliance on the U.S. and where you began, which is the description of the Weimar Triangle and a new German government coming in, if the U.S. does pull back somewhat from Europe, do you think that pulls Europe together, or do you think that causes it to fracture more?
It pulls Europe together. Actually, it's interesting that a lot of the effects of this administration have been positive for us, but also for you, if you believe the current administration. So we're spending more on defense. You've helped many governments around the world to become more popular. I have lots of examples where actually it's a good thing. But of course, in toto, it's not a good thing if you're looking at it from my viewpoint. So I think that, but we can't change that. I think this is, and it's, I don't know, you know this better than I do. I don't know where the US is going. Also medium run, I don't know. And I can see a lot of merit in what the US is also doing and what the people want in this country, And there's a lot of dynamicism and great things in the United States. So obviously this is, I don't know where it's going. I don't know where the political system is going. I look at your electoral system. I look at how it's financed. I look at all this thing. And I don't know where it's going to end up. It's just that maybe the naivety is the wrong word, but the sort of assurance that we can trust on I'm not the only one to say this, I think even my boss said that, Munich Security Conference a few years, the trust that we had in and maybe that was wrong, and maybe naive, that in some sense you're there in a way on many of these issues, foremost defense. That I think is maybe correctly gone, and I think the consequence of that, and this is now our homework. Actually, it's our homework. We should not blame anybody else. I think looking at a colleague from Serbia, who's not even in the EU yet, but that actually we need to do our homework, and we should have done, and we need to do that urgently. And then I think Europe, and I think I was listening at the end to Mrs. Albuquerque, the commissioner was saying, probably talking about capital market union. I'm not sure what that Europe can be a competitive, dynamic economy in the world. It's a tall order because the rest of the world is also becoming a lot more competitive. And competitiveness is a relative concept. It's not an absolute concept. So everybody else is getting competitive. Not everybody can be competitive, but everybody can grow. That's a different thing. Then I think Europe can be, it has a positive side, but we need to do it now. And I think this is also what the German government, I close on that, what is saying that it's nice to talk about it. It's nice to have a coalition contract. We now need to get going. And that's why everybody's waiting for the 6th of March, including the German media who's here. They will undoubtedly watch it very carefully and then look at how the action is going to go. And it's not only Germany, but it's also Europe. And then I think we can be a good partner also for the future of the United States. Was that a good closing?
Positive message, a call to action.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much for taking time during Bank Fund Week to join us here. And we'll be back honing in on Central and Eastern Europe in our next session. But I'll turn it back over to Dan after a round of applause for handling that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Dr. Roller. Yes, so refresh your coffee and take a break. We have a terrific panel. We should be back about 11:15, if you wouldn't mind. Yes.
Why don't you just catch them afterwards? And you can. Sure, but you can just catch them now. I think we're going to get a break. I mean, go ahead.
She doesn't want me to know. She wants everybody else.
We'll drill down on the question of how some Central and Eastern European economies are increasing their resilience against threats from Russia and China and other international developments. These days, of course, geoeconomics is just as important as geopolitics and geostrategy. Now, most European economies are not booming, although Central European economies are doing quite well. The government budgets are under a lot of pressure and the prospect of tariffs looms. And some EU leaders are openly speculating about whether to bolster their economies by hedging towards China. However difficult these economic challenges are, and tariffs certainly don't help, China isn't the answer. The transatlantic economic space remains the most dynamic, most important market globally, as well as the most dynamic and most promising. It is really difficult to imagine a more authoritative panel to help us make sense of these issues, including 3 Romanians, although somebody who carries both passports, Dr. Dragu, and of course we'll leave some time afterwards for discussion and questions and answers, so please have your questions ready. So let's dive in. I'll lead off with sort of a broad general question to each panelist, the same question to each panelist in no particular order. And you're all here for the Bank Fund meetings. And so what messages are you bringing to Washington for your interlocutors here, for the USG, for the financial community, for the United States as such? If you could all maybe just sort of give us those messages and in no more than 5 minutes, please. Maybe start with ladies first, Dr. Dragu, who also happens to have been the first female president of the Romanian Senate. So in addition to all of her other achievements, including now as Governor General of the Bank of Moldova. Well, Dr. Dragu.
Thank you, and I'm very honored to be here with you today. And well, annual spring meetings in Washington, World Bank and IMF spring meetings. Of course, we from Moldova, we come with the message that we continue our reform programs and our efforts to get to the European Union. Mm-hmm. We started the negotiations for the EU. We are in full process. My colleagues are always in Brussels. It is not a single day when somebody from the Central Bank of Moldova or from the government is not in Brussels. So we have intense discussions, and we have we are in this process of bilateral screening on several topics, and the National Bank of Moldova is involved in this process heavily. So our main message is that Moldova continues its path for EU accession and for consolidating democracy. And from our point of view, being a member of the EU is the only chance for prosperity for our citizens and for consolidating institutions.
And that is it. That's your message.
Yeah, that's our message, and
nothing else. That's an important message. It's a very important message.
It's very strong. It's I think it covers everything, and also we can get into details on how we implement these reforms and how many areas we tackle. Moldova got a large financing program from the European Union. It's 1.9 billion euros. It's over 10% of GDP, and this is a program similar to this recovery and resilience mechanism for EU member states. So it's a combination of reforms and investments. And yes, we do have lots of work to do.
You're under a lot of pressure.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
You cannot see, but yes, we are.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so Minister Ivan, your message which may differ slightly from your other Romanian minister colleague who has a different portfolio, but what is your message?
I don't want your portfolio, definitely. Nobody wants it right now.
What did you come here with? Your message is to your interlocutors, to the USG, to whoever is listening, and following what's happening in Romania.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and I say hello to all our distinguished guests. I want to bring a little bit context of my portfolio in that moment in Ministry of Economy, Digitization, Entrepreneurship and Tourism. We are managing the entire defense industry of Romania. We are managing the entire mining industry of Romania with our companies, non-energetic mining with raw materials, and it's a very important portfolio. And third topic, we invest more than 6 billion in Romanian digital transformation of the private sector and digital transformation of the government. And third one, tourism, it's important for us and it's important for our branding. And getting back in our very important targets with US, in that moment, US, we are a member of European Union. We see the large and the big picture of that in context. But we are one of the greatest friends of US, and definitely Romania are the greatest friends of US in Central and Eastern Europe. That's certain. We have the security umbrella of US. We have more than 7 billion euros by year economic exchanges with US. And in digital side, more than 65% of our procurements in the last 2 years, I was the Minister of Research and Digitization, are with US technology. The last example is the governmental cloud, which we are making with US technology from Microsoft. And it's important for us to make our straight economic roadmap with US in Romania to choose very wisely the way we are reshaping the entire Central and Eastern Europe region using US technology, keeping in the same time our goals as EU member state, but we couldn't forget our very good cooperation and our very good common interest with US. So reforming Romania in the last 10, 20 years was based a lot about US principles and freedom and the principles of economic development. In that new context of very business-oriented policies, definitely want to work straight, concrete with our partners from US government, from US private funds, from US think tank, to make the things happen. Not only to debate, but to keep our values in top priorities, but develop a lot in economic side. And we have a proposal more than 10 billion euros for the next year to work together with US private companies and US strategic partners.
So
I could develop any part of that proposal.
Romania is open for business and is as all in on the bilateral relationship.
And it's not only open, it's proactive and very concrete. We don't want to say only, okay, let's meet one to each other to see, okay, that is the first step, but we know very well what we want. So we want strategic investment to work with our partners very, very concrete. And we have a portfolio, we know what we want, and want only to set our common agenda and our setup. Because in that moment, we think about special economic zones, for example, in Romania, in innovation, in defense, AI, quantum, and so on. And in that new matter, we have very concrete common goals, and US could have a very important footprint in Eastern Europe through Romania.
Yes, that footprint
Concrete,
is really,
not
is really quite
theoretical.
very, very important, not only economically. Minister Tonchos, your messages to your interlocutors, to the USG, to the Washington policy community.
First of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation. It's a great honor for me to be here with you. it's not only my message. It's a general message from all the financial ministers from EU. It's a message for a strong partnership with USA. It's a message for a constructive dialogue with USA, and it's a constructive dialogue with all the banks and financial institutions to find solutions in these very challenging times. You know, everybody knows about this 90 days of dialogue. It's a period which must be used for a strong and very effective partnership between US and EU. It's not only a meeting with the banks, it's not only a meeting, a period for meetings with rating agencies and financial institutions. It's a meeting in Washington between EU member states and USA. It is very important for us to find solutions not to destroy and to find constructive measures which can lead to a good collaboration between our member states and USA. Everything is linking us, the values, the contracts, the partnerships, and must be, and we have to keep this kind of collaboration, and we cannot destroy anything. We don't want to be pushed closer, and if I step forward and I come with a message from Romania side, we don't want to be pushed closer to anybody else, but to USA. We don't want to build other partnerships and we don't want to look for other alternatives. We are interested to build our relation with USA, NATO, EU, and to become stronger and stronger in this perspective. Probably you know, in our region, in Central Eastern Europe, we have a lot of countries with huge potential. Investments are going well. In Romania, we have the biggest budget for investments in our annual budget in 2025. We have more than 30 billion euros for investments in different public sectors. So we are really committed to close this year with the highest investment on the governmental side and to prove that we have our own resources to increase our economy and to keep Romania on this track. Yes, we are a little bit strange in perspective of deficit perspective on 2024. We are the champion, let's say, if can I say that about the deficit situation, but we can keep under control this situation, and we already started to implement this multi-annual agreement with the Commission, with the European Commission, and we will have this 7-year gradually decreasing process of the deficit. We have a strong economy which is growing yearly. And Mr. Ivan told you which are the very important and main sectors with investments, high investments in Romania. So we can discuss about the details if you want. These are our messages.
Okay. Last but not least, the legendary Czech ambassador, Tomáš Pojar. Ambassador Pojar, your messages.
Well, first of all,
you're also, excuse me, you're more of a, as a national security advisor, you're more political than economic, but you also think about economics too.
yeah, my meetings are more on the side of the national security rather than the IMF and World Bank meeting. But I think that those are closely linked. And the main message from Europe is that, first of all, we want to keep the transatlantic alliance in both in the economic terms as well as in the security terms and defense terms. We understand that there will be and there is a need for rebalancing on of the NATO and more share on the European side and more spending on the European side and more independence on the European side. And I think that most, if not all, Europeans have been spending more and will be spending more, and I think that there can be a good deal reached at the NATO summit in Hague. And the same that we see that there needs to be some rebalancing on the economic trade economic side. We are, I think, ready for that. And there has been I think, very wise and realistic approach of European side towards the US tariffs. And we are ready for negotiations and for discussions. Then for any discussion, there must be two sides. But we think that it's possible and it's achievable, and we should, that it's in our mutual interest to work together because there is no better alternative. At the same time, I think we all understand that, yes, the times are changing and there is a recalibration time for both, for the security and for the economic eyes, and everyone is ready for that, and it has basically already started, so it's nothing new. And we can only argue if now it's an acceleration by Donald Trump in his second term, and that it has started already with Barack Obama. At least on the security side, it did start with Barack Obama, and on the economic side, it did start with Donald Trump during his first term, and was continued by Joe Biden in his term. So we do see quite clearly those paths and that continuity, and I think that we are ready for that. So I hope that there will be serious negotiations. There are already, and there will be on the security defense side, and I hope that there will be deep, serious negotiations to come to a good deal also on the economic side, not only regarding the tariffs, but yes, regarding the tariffs. So and for us, we are one of the countries most exposed in the tariff war, as one of the most opened economies in Europe and in the world. Then, of course, the tariffs will hit us, and we are exposed directly with US and indirectly through Germany. So it's us and Slovaks and Hungarians and Germans which are going to be hit the most. But at the same time, we will manage. Okay, so it's our budget deficits are low. Our debt is low, so especially compared to US and to some countries. So we will manage, and the easier it will be for us, the best for the long-term relationship.
I'm struck by the sort of the.
What?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. Okay. So you need more than one to tango. Okay.
Yeah. I'm struck by the sort of the upbeat messages. I mean, because you listen to the chatter and the media commentary, and it's much darker. It's much more sort of ominous, and some of the commentary is really just very, very different. And you, however, ministers, policymakers, very senior government officials are coming with a very different message. That's something we should be listening to here and taking note of.
Very different message.
Well, your messages are also upbeat. They're also sort of so positive, and which of course is music to many ears. But some of the commentary you see in terms of the economic sort of relationships between the United States and Europe right now are more somber.
I think these days the European Union member states are more united than ever. We are united, we are calm, we are waiting for constructive dialogue. But at the same time, it is not a secret. All the measures are on the table. All the countermeasures are on the table. They are finalized, but we don't want to reach that point when we'll be used. We are not China. We don't want to play a ping pong with anybody. We are calm. We are discussing with the partners. We are trying to find solutions. But we need, as you said, for the tango, there's a partner. We need a partner.
And we are happy that the Chinese are now playing the ping pong, so we can watch. Okay.
So I know the two Romanian ministers have to leave a little earlier than the end of the panel because you have to go over to a bank or the fund or both or whatever. But in any case, so maybe I can just kind of drill down a little bit more on the Romanian, the two Romanian ministers. So, Minister Tancho, so since you were just so you have the next round of, or the first round of presidential elections are going to take place in Romania on May 4th. In less than 2 weeks.
Which first and which second? Because we had two first and two second.
Yeah, and so you
quite strange situation. Yeah.
Yeah, you may not want to go into detail on this because for obvious reasons, but but the election is getting a lot of attention here in the United States and elsewhere. And I mean, and now the Romanian constitution doesn't really go into the question of economics. It doesn't envisage much of an economic role for the president. And so the outcome may not matter from an economic or financial standpoint. But are there economic or financial implications of any of the different outcomes that we might wish to be aware of? Because I mean, this election is being treated by some as a massively important election, more so than usual. And so from an economic standpoint, the president has more of a kind of a national security role or a political role, but on the economic side, anything we should be aware of or focusing on?
As I said, all states need a stable government, a stable coalition, a stable parliamentary system to be governed. And this is what was questioned in December when the elections were canceled. And after this decision of the Constitutional Court, we had this negative outlook for a rating agency because of the political risk of the destabilization of the country. There is no political risk. We have a stable parliament. We have a stable parliamentary majority. And yes, we want to win the elections with our candidate, and we will win the elections, even if this, not the extremists, because they are sovereignists right now. It's much more interesting to say I'm sovereignist, I'm not an extremist, but they are extremists. So we will win the elections against the extremists, and we will have a stable situation at the presidential institution. But yes, it's very important for everybody. It's a very important message to all the investors, to rating agencies, for banks, for everybody, because we have to stabilize the situation in Romania. We will have the first tour on 4th of May, in a few days, and on 18th of May, the second one. It's a challenge, but all of us, we are facing challenging times, different perspectives. We can win these elections, and we will have a stable situation. The government can be not, I don't know, or the political, the parliament can be not dissolved by the president in Romania. They cannot touch the parliament. He cannot touch the parliament. He cannot touch, theoretically, the government. It is not a situation like in, or the system is like, it's not like in France, for example. Yes, he can influence it. He can influence a majority. He has the biggest number of direct votes as a person in Romania, but he cannot control 100% the parliament. He cannot control 100% the government. So we will find a solution after the elections to stabilize everything and to prove to the whole world that we are a stable country, not only economically, and not only budgetary, but politically too.
Do you agree, Mr. Ivan?
Despite the fact that me and my good friend and colleague Tanțoș are from different parties in the government, we know very well that we love our coalition. But from the same coalition, and we love our country so much, and we're working together to make our country to be the most important player in our region. And if you allow me, I would like to bring 3 numbers. First of all, when you have that election in the first round, and the guy who are having the most important number of votes are giving messages, and he brings quotes from Russian wise men that could help and develop Romania, definitely a lot of foreign investors, a lot of US, Europe companies in Romania which have plans of development and strong investment, they put a concrete pause. I discuss with them because that's my job. So that was a very messy message for all of them. Second one, you have a candidate which are getting number 8 as viral worldwide, more than Kim Kardashian and others. Yeah, it's a fact. He get number 8 worldwide, and that in 2 days.
On TikTok, you mean?
On TikTok, yes, in 2 days with zero money. How? I have a PhD in sociology, and before I work in PR and social networks, and no one could tell me how you could get with zero money number 8 worldwide. You are not a rock star. And he's not a rock star, that guy. And after that, we discussed about the way the economic most important players and foreign investors in Romania told us, okay, guys, let's make a pause with our strategic plans in Romania and our strategic investment and wait until the end of the election next year. So that's the context. And in that moment, Romania, we have a Harvard review. We are on 20 worldwide as economic complexity. We have a very strategic and important position. And it's very important for us to speak to the entire world, and especially here in Washington, D.C., to U.S. partners and friends about our commitment to grow our businesses over there and to keep democracy, to keep freedom of speech, because we have the option at the same time, okay, let's switch off the TikTok in Romania. But it's not a fair solution. And we found technical ways to protect and to keep the freedom of speech at Romanian level, and in the same time, to give assurance that we'll have very concrete and very transparent election now in May for all the competitors, but without interference of any other country inside of our election. I don't want to speak about the name of the country, but we are a sovereign country and want to elect transparent our president. And that's the message. And as my colleagues say before, in the parliament, we have election after 1 week after the first round of presidential election. And we are the most important parties, the S&D party, which I'm part of it. This is the same party with the prime minister. We have the Liberal Party, the right wing. We have the national Magyar majority with my colleague Tancos.
I'm coming from a Hungarian minority union.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. And we have the USR, still pro-European and pro-Atlantic party. And in that moment, we have more than 60%, 64, 65% in Romanian parliament, which are getting the government. So before 2028, at least, we have a strong majority in the parliament, a strong government. Yes, of course, they make a lot of noise, that guys, on social network. But what is important, we want to give that message of very concrete country and solid country with solid election. We have that hybrid attack against us. We have 1 and 2 months before in Republic of Moldova, the same involvement of another neighbors. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, we are committed to give that message of very concrete and solid partnership with our friends. So it's about money in the end, in the economic and strategic and common project.
But your point about how even at the election of a president, which doesn't have theoretically much, sort of to do with economics, does impact investors' decisions, as it did in the case after the November elections, and that's. Yep.
The second day after election, I was called, at least by 40, one of the most important foreign investors and business people from Romania. And they asked me, okay, Bogdan, what we will do with that? Because it's a messy situation. We have problems with our investors. We have because we have that guy on the first round. I don't know, because it's not in my charge to deal with that. It's not. And to be very crystal clear, the Constitutional Court is the supreme judicial body of Romania, decided to cancel that election. Not the government, not any other institutional body of Romania. The judge from that court. So, to be very clear, that message.
Well, the good people of Romania will decide soon, and we'll watch it
We are really
closely,
waiting
yes.
for it.
Anyway, so Dr. Dragu, so you've been fighting Moldova, and you personally have been fighting really hard to stay on the European Western path against relentless pressure from the Kremlin. It's been using most elements of its playbook to weaken your economy, to undermine your sovereignty, to undermine the people of Moldova's confidence in a Western future. And your government has pushed back hard. There were two sort of successful cases last year, the presidential elections as well as the EU membership referendum, but it's a constant struggle. What are you and the central bank doing to strengthen Moldova's economic resilience against this relentless onslaught, and to improve the financial sector and to bolster your country's appeal to foreign investors?
First of all, we stick to our primary objective, meaning maintaining price stability. We contribute to a safe, stable, and predictable macroeconomic context. And with such a macro context, we are able to be more appealing to investors. And I'm talking about foreign investors, but also domestic investors. We had recently a new energy crisis that resulted in a shock on prices and a spike of inflation. But we took decisive and immediate measures. We increased policy rate twice within 1 month. And I'm happy to see that inflation now tends to go down and to go back in the corridor, in the inflation targeting corridor. So we do contribute to macroeconomic stability and predictability. Then we are very diligent regulator and supervisors. We are supervisors for banking sector, for non-bank financial institutions, and for insurance sector. And on the banking sector, I can say that the banks are solid. We have 93% of equity coming from the EU member states. And we did lots of reforms in order to strengthen governance at the level of the banking sector as well as in the central bank. We are in cooperation with the European Banking Authority, and this year they're going to finalize a report, an evaluation on legislative equivalence. So by the end of 2025, we'll have a sort of a stamp from European Banking Authority saying that yes, legislation in Moldova is in line with EU legislation in the banking sector. We run also this year in 2025 an assessment of the financial sector with the IMF and the World Bank, the Financial Sector Assessment Program. It's a very difficult exercise, takes lots of resources, but it's very necessary because we want also to show that our banking and financial sector is solid. We are taking care of our investors and citizens, and we look at costs for doing business. Meaning, for example, we introduced last year instant payment and has a great success. In the EU, becomes mandatory as of next year. And also we succeeded to become a member of the European single payment area in Euro, SEPA. It means that fees for making transactions with EU member states in Euro are decreasing from 20, 30, 50 euros per transaction, even 200 for larger amounts, to 1, 2, 3 euros. So we made a very simple calculation, and the savings for domestic investors and individuals would be like 20 million euros from the first year. So we are contributing to have this, to increase confidence of our investors, but also to make business easier for them. And I have to say that Moldova is on the position 46, is ranking 46 out of 190 countries in terms of doing business, easy of doing business. So we are doing pretty well, and the country is pretty much digitalized. Around 65% of all documents needed for a business are digitalized, and we plan to go up to 100. And this is a common effort of the government, but also of the central bank, because we are also pushing banks to have this very digital approach in their relationship with clients, while being extremely careful on AML/CFT policies. So we do contribute to a safe business environment and attracting investors.
May I ask you, since I've got you here, can you share any vignettes or any any insight into how Russia is trying to destabilize your economy?
Well, that's we saw this buying votes that happened.
Okay.
We took measures in terms of payments. So we had to be very careful at the payment system, and to make sure that the banking, no such money are transferred through the banking sector. And we are pretty confident with the measures that we took at the level of the banking sector.
That would make it a very interesting conversation to develop this, but I know that we've got a limited amount of time. Ambassador Boyar, so we're hearing a lot of comment these days about that this is a time for choosing, that the EU, for example, or others have to decide on which side they want to be economically and politically, the United States or China, or the West and China. So politically, Western countries generally understand and distrust the CCP and its goals, and most are not interested in moving closer to the CCP. But on economics, many players do not necessarily want to come down on one side or the other so clearly. Some want to play both sides against the middle. Some Czech companies have internalized the need to bolster their resilience and by decoupling from China, and are prospering. Now may not be the time for decision on this, but we're seeing more de-risking and discussion of this matter. Is this something that pundits are making into an issue, or is this something that policymakers are actually grappling with? And how do you, as the National Security Advisor of the Czech Republic, look at this issue?
Well, first of all, if the decision would be if the Europeans would go with US or with Americans or with China, then the Europeans would go with Americans, okay? It's as easy as that. But I can see a scenario that we will cooperate more if we have a successful NATO summit and we cooperate in defense, and if we overcome the economic and trade recalibration to a beneficial deal, then yes, then we will work together also on the China issue, and we will be much closer to be discussing that. But we cannot rule out the opposite scenario, that we are not able to reach an agreement at NATO summit, and more specifically, which I think we will be, but more specifically that we are not going to be able to reach some agreement and good agreement on the trade and other economic and financial issues. Then there will be temptation of some to really work closer with China. To put it more simply, so if as Europeans we are not pushed by Americans to the Chinese embrace, then we will not be embraced by China. But if the Americans will push us there, we will be there. At least some, okay? I'm not talking about Czechs. We have no Chinese investment in Czech Republic. We have no Czech investment in China. We have almost no trading with China on our way, like export to China. Yes, there is a huge export of Chinese goods into Czech economy.
Excepting Temu. Excepting Temu.
Yeah, it's okay. This is the import issue. So which, by the way, if we wanted to handle that, we could handle that. Okay, so it is in our hands. I mean, in our Czech hands and in our European hands. So that's possible to deal with. But to put it simply, if the Americans will fail us on Russia, then don't expect that we will not fail you on China. Okay, it's as simple as that. Yes, and we should talk about it, and we should get ready for that. And I think that it's very clear for any European in any discussions which I do attend with Prime Minister or in any other discussions. I'm also the EU Sherpa, so I'm attending the European meetings. In that say there is a clear understanding that yes, we should do as much as possible to work closer with US, but it needs both sides. And it is true that sometimes there are some who are saying, well, it's not so easy with US. The US doesn't want that discussion with us. So let's see. I think we should have patience. We should wait. We should be strategic in that sense. And it could be fine. And we have to try to have it fine. But the decision is not only on our side. I think that if you look into the world stage, and it looks like this old Soviet joke, okay? But it's not a joke, that the Chinese and Japanese and Korean ministers meet together in order to coordinate how to cope with US. So it's from the other side of the globe. Mm-hmm. But yes, I can see also the scenario, which I don't think it's likely, but it's possible, that some Europeans at least will be pushed into the same situation. Mm-hmm. And then it can be judged if it's more of their fault or some other's fault. But it needs really understanding on both sides that the good option for both sides of the Atlantic is to recalibrate. Okay, fine, so the relationship, but in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Minister Tantas, you have to leave pretty soon. Do you have time to maybe comment on this, or if you, because I know you've got to be at the World Bank, but if you've got time just maybe to add a quick observation to that from a Romanian perspective, or you, Mr. Ivan, as well?
It would be better to take some questions, very short, if you want.
Well, I mean,
I can comment, but if you will leave.
Well, no. What we do is you would depart, and then we would continue the conversation until I think 12:30-ish.
Okay. Good.
No democracy, okay? No, let's keep it in order.
Do it American way. But I can just underline that we are actually united, and we are acting as united 27 countries. And we are trying to be so calm to try to find solutions. This is our message, and I think it is possible. It is really possible we can find a way. And the first good sign came from USA with this 90 days of suspension of the taxes. On the economical side, it is not the best way to try to cut the collaboration using different tools of taxes or political tools or military tools. Yes, we have to have a common understanding and a decision to do not increase the collaboration with the Russians. Yes, it's very clear for everybody. We have to increase our partnership and to make it better with USA. But we are not alone in this room. There are some other continents and countries which have their interest, their plans and strategies, and we have to find somehow the common solution for everybody. It's the best solution for us. But for us means Europe and USA. So we are really committed to do this in this way, and we will see.
We have, I agree with my colleague, we have a word in Romania, if you are not on the table, you are in the menu. So we made all our best to be on the table. Because I have all respect and friendship with our friends from Spain or Portugal, but they are not in situation to be neighbors with Russia, as we and Hungary and Poland
And
are.
Czech Republic.
And Czech Republic too. So it's about economic and it's about security. So in our history, a very strong ally outside the EU, the most important are US. So we never forget that. And he is concrete, and when we have a deal, we keep our deal by our side and by US side. And that's important because we have trust between us. Definitely we're a member of EU, and I'm pretty sure that we didn't must to choose between EU and US. And in that moment, I'm pretty sure that every one of us are making our discussing about our numbers and make at least 1, 2, 3 scenario, base case scenario, and after that B, C, and so on. And in that moment, our A plan is to keep growing, and that's why we are here. That's why we are here, that strong signal. I speak about my economic side. I don't want to get to the portfolio of my friend in the finance side, but we are together. And we want to increase concrete the way we are doing business together. And that's the most important message in my perspective about economic, and to keep Romania and Central Eastern Europe as very important and strategic partner with US. But obviously in win-win conditions and win-win partnership.
Okay, if you have to leave, I don't want to keep you from your next meeting.
We will leave.
I'm not suggesting you leave, but I was told you had to leave.
Yes, I told you before the meeting.
Thank you very much for joining us, even for this period of time, and really appreciated your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and keep in contact.
Okay, good.
And now we can finally discuss Romania.
A pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch and count on us.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so right, so now we have sort of can get down to drill down even deeper. Dr. Dragu, you've had some significant macroeconomic and financial challenges in recent years, but you described sort of how you dealt with them. Sort of, especially since the problems of the 2010s. What are you doing? That can't be all you're doing, because you've got such a set of challenges there. Can you go into maybe a little bit more detail on how you're grappling with these like really tough issues?
On macro side?
On the macro side, yeah. Well, the issues that you deal with, the soundness of money, the balance of payments, all the economic issues that you deal with in the central bank.
Okay. The combination of the war and the energy crisis.
Right, because I mean you're under massive pressure.
Hit us significantly, and inflation went up to 34.6%, 34.
I know, not exactly.
In October 2022. Therefore, central bank decided to increase policy rate to 21.5%. Of course, it made the credit activity and financial intermediation impossible. So we saw a significant decrease of lending, and in general, lending is at a low level. So that's one area I focus on, to increase lending and financial intermediation, especially to SMEs. So this happened in 2022. Then 2023 was a year where a central bank started to gradually decrease the policy rate, and we saw financial intermediation regaining, we even went down to with inflation at 3.3%. It was the lowest level last year. What happened, unfortunately, at the end of December and in beginning of January this year, we had a new energy shock, I would not say energy crisis. I would rather say the last step of energy reform. It was a significant increase of gas price by 27%, and by electricity, this was the most painful, by 75% in January this year. We, as a central bank, we reacted immediately. We increased policy rate. However, we see that the economy is keeping momentum, and the banks are continuing their lending activities. They did not pass through entirely this higher policy rates, higher interest rates to current loans. And from our conversation with banks, they are confident in the macro situation. So they see that it was a sort of a one-off, and we are going to calm down the market. The growth forecast this year looks like over 3%, which is really generous. That's the latest, 3.5% is the latest forecast from the IMF. And it's really generous in the current context. I think it was a little bit reduced downward recently because of uncertainties at the global level. But still, we are in the positive area with economic growth. There are some risks to this macro forecast. One risk is agriculture, and the country and the structure of GDP relies a lot on agriculture. So we are dependent on weather, and therefore we saw some, last year was a bad agriculture year, which affected our economic growth, and of course added something on prices and inflation. For this year, okay, we're looking at agriculture. We hope to have a better year. But how we deal in terms of the banking sector, we pay attention to loans to agriculture. So we don't want this to be a problem, to have NPLs there. And the government has taken a number of measures in order to support the agriculture sector. Even in this new package I was talking earlier in the growth plan with the EU, there is a significant component to support agriculture there. So we want to make sure that banking sector is supporting this very important sector, agriculture, but stays safe. And I think we are okay so far. Well, from macro point of view, I'm not really concerned. We are going on the right direction, and I see improving competitiveness of the country. As I said, in general, that's the small country, but with a very high level of digitalization. And doing business in Moldova is really easy. And
encouraging news. One last question for Ambassador Poyar, and then we can go to discussion, questions and answers. So people sometimes say that if Germany sneezes, the Czech Republic gets a cold, given some of the linkages between your countries. Germany's economy its growth has now been downgraded to basically zero for this year. It was in recession the last couple of years, so your economy is sort of probably hasn't benefited from that. Is there anything you can say about how the Czech Republic is grappling with this connection, plus the fact that if in fact tariffs, the more severe version actually take place, what you're doing to prepare for that or potentially deal with it?
Yes, you are right that always when German economy goes up, our economy also goes up with that. And when German economy goes down, then we do see the effects, because at the end we are competing with Austrians, which is the next Bundesland or part of Germany from the economic point of view. Okay, so this is the reality. So now our macroeconomic figures are better than that of Germany. But yes, the situation in Germany is definitely dragging us down. But in order to be optimistic, then You have pushed Germany into more defense spending and more infrastructural spending, so as Americans. So there will be billions of euros spent inside Germany on defense and on infrastructure. And in the new German coalition agreement, there is a necessity to build more linkages with Poland and Czech Republic. Finally, the Germans realized that the longest border they have is with us. Okay, so it's the realization that we are really very important for Berlin. Finally, Bavaria and Saxony are not in the opposition of government, but they are part of the government, which is great for us. So with this spending, I think it can partly offset the problems and the troubles of the tariff war across the Atlantic and globally. So if it will be more softer landing or it will be the better situation. Then hopefully the new German government will realize, and they do realize, and they will do something. The question is like how fast and how effectively, that in order to keep up the European economy or to beef up European economy, we must deregulate and we must be more competitive, but it doesn't go without reassessment of at least parts of the Green Deal. And I think that there is more understanding now in Germany than parts of the Green Deal, and the regulation coming from the Green Deal has to be reevaluated, and it will be beneficial to the economy, because without this discussion about Green Deal, the competitiveness of the economy will not, of the European economy, German economy, will not be on the table. So it's hard discussions. It will take time. But we are hopeful that the new German government will see it this way and will see it more closer than our position has been for years. And I think it will be the case. The question is how far it will go and how fast it will be. But as Germans have shifted completely, I would say, on the migration issue over the 10 years and moved to our positions, then I hope that they will soon move to our positions also on the Green Deal issues, and that our two economies, which are very much linked and very much the most industrialized economy still in Europe, that we will stop jointly this deindustrialization of Europe, and we will keep the European industry competitive, which will be good for our economy. So looking at the glass rather half full than half empty, I see potential in this crisis, and I have lived enough part of my life in Israel, so where they really, more than 7 years altogether, and they have really taught me that let's see every crisis as an opportunity, and this crisis have a lot of opportunities. So yes, we will be less dependent on the automotive industry. Fine, that's life. So we will have more and better defense industry and more competitive. And maybe the Czech defense companies will buy more American companies in the future, as they have done in the past. So we will see some investment here. It's not for Lockheed Martin to be bought now, but some others are on the list. So we are fine.
On that note, why don't we sort of end the conversation part and then turn it over to you, the participants, for any comments or questions you may have. I think, Dan, you have a microphone. So, ma'am. And would you please identify yourself as well?
My name is Kelly Curry with the Atlantic Council. I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the question on China that you asked, and specifically the response on that said that, you know, if the U.S. pushes Europe toward China, that they'll go that way, or some will. Does Europe not see China's support for Russia and its war on Ukraine, which is instrumental, and otherwise Russia would not be able to maintain the tempo, scale of its attack on Ukraine without that support, up to and including the recent detention of Chinese soldiers by Ukrainian forces, as Europe's problem as well? I guess I'm troubled by this implication that China is America's problem and not Europe's from a security point of view. Thanks.
I think that Europe is quite aware of what the Chinese are doing regarding support of Russia and cooperation with Russia and regarding Ukraine. I think Europe is quite aware of the European countries, or at least those wise European countries, that what the Chinese are doing now and what they could be doing more, or what they could be doing less. And I think that there is this discussion with Chinese, which is going on in this dimension. But For us, yes, Ukraine is the largest war on the European continent since the Second World War. And for me, being born under the Soviet occupation, yes, if President Putin says that he wants to go beyond 1997, meaning that he wants to go back to the years of the Cold War. It's interesting, the only thing what Putin and what the Kremlin regime has accepted, it's reminding us, and it should be reminding us to the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, that the only thing they have accepted is the unification of Germany and East Germany being part of NATO, okay? The rest should not be part of NATO in their view. So this is the preoccupation, and we are seeing what the Chinese are doing, and we are, I think, telling the Chinese that we are watching that very closely, and that, and we are seeing, by the way, we are telling it to everyone, and we should be telling to everyone that this is a potentially existential threat for us, and we do see who is helping those who are participating in this existential threat. But at the same time, with some messages from US, there is certain confusion that Russia is not such a threat. And for us, it is a threat. So I think that the dialogue about the recalibration of NATO and the pivot to Asia and more defense spending and more Europeans taking care of our own security, it's a discussion which is taking place. It's a fair discussion that it must be there and we must do more spending. But this recalibration should not be that we take care of Europe only and we take care of Europe only from tomorrow, regardless of the Russian threat. And US is going to concentrate on China only purely, and it will leave us to the Russian threat. Because if that would be the case, and I don't think it will be the case, I think we will find a solution, and we will find and we will succeed in this recalibration. But if that would be the scenario, then by the way, as Europeans, by definition, we would not have any power, anything to go with US, because we would be fully, totally preoccupied by our situation. Many would feel betrayed. And those who would feel seriously betrayed, then they would let it be seen also in Washington. So, and to the Americans. So I think that we should be aware of that, and we should be aware of those, that there is a chance to make this recalibration deal. But if we don't try to make it from both sides, then it may fail. And the failure would be seen also in our ability and in European ability and in the ability of European countries and European countries to help on the US regarding China. And I don't mean militarily, but technologically, trade-wise, investment-wise, etc. So let's not break all the bonds and let's recalibrate and let's keep that in mind. And again, in this sense, I think that we will find the deal and it can be done. And there will be some rebalancing acts. And in the historical books, we will look back. And I think for Europe, the turning point between different periods is going to be the Russian attack on Kiev. In some other aspects, it can be now the trade issues and trade wars from the perspective of some other countries or from the global perspective. Let's see how it's settled. But definitely, the period which we have started in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall and with all our revolutions, it has ended. And now we are entering, and the question mark is if we have entered that already 3 years ago, or if we are entering it now, and how it's going to be remembered in the future, that we are entering a different period, which. Again, let's look at it as an opportunity, because it's also true, and let's admit it. The past period it was impossible to sustain, and the making of this new period coming, it was already for some time, as I already mentioned. It was Barack Obama talking about pivot to Asia. It was Robert Gates talking in Munich Security Conference about unsustainability of European non-spending for defense. It was not J.D. Vance last year. It was Robert Gates, who served under George W. Bush as well as under Barack Obama. So that's where it started. Now it's being accelerated. And now let's look at it globally, but also within the transatlantic space and transatlantic alliance. Let's save as much as possible. And let's put the new recalibration or new basis, which can last another 30 years. Fine with me. Then it's over to the next generations.
Okay, we probably maybe have time for one more question. Sir?
Thank you, Marek Wosiński from the Polish Economic Institute. So about the COF, one short comment that for Poland, it's also the indirect trade via Germany and other European Union countries that goes more to the United States. It's 57% of value added that goes to the United States is indirectly exported through other countries. So yes, this coffee is seen, but we are quite strong without this strong growth in Germany. Question is on China as well. I've heard that what if there is a theory that China could play a positive role in solving Ukraine, that China is the player that could press Russia to cease invasion. So is there a possibility from your perspective, Ambassador Poyar, that China can play a positive role? And what if we cannot solve a transatlantic dispute and China tries here to play a positive role? Thank you.
Definitely there is a role for China to play, and it can be a positive role regarding Russia. There is no doubt about it, and it's in Chinese hands to play this positive role. By the way, I think that in the past they did play a positive role already on the use of nuclear weapons. Okay, so they can play a positive role now, and they are more than welcomed to play a positive role. And by the way, they have played some positive role regarding Ukraine. Okay, they in the telecommunication sector, they played according to the books and positive. So yes, China should play and can play a positive role, and we should be happy and we should encourage China to play a positive role. And we should talk with China directly when we do see some negative role. And I can tell you that we have been discussing that and I have been discussing that with my Chinese counterparts. So there is a room for anyone to play the positive role, and China is an important country. And there is a huge dependence of Russia on China. And there is a growing dependence of Russia on China. So it's Russian choice if they want to be dependent on China. So I don't know if we would ask Russian citizens if they wish to do this. But yes, they are more and more dependent on China. So this gives China more leverage and more space into play a positive role. And this is, by the way, one of the reasons why we do want to keep a dialogue with China on economic issues, but also on the political issues, as Europeans and as Czechs. Because it is also about Chinese role globally, and it is about Chinese role in regarding as I already said, and as everyone knows, the most robust and deepest military conflict in Europe since the World War II. Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, it's 12:30, so I think we probably have to call it for now. Thank you so much, Dr. Dragu, Ambassador Poyar. A round of applause, please, for our esteemed panel.
Thank you for the invitation.
We'll feature three guests. First, my close colleague and friend, Peter Rao, who's the director of our Center on Europe and Eurasia, who you met a little earlier today.
Where's the applause?
Next, we have Jan Ruzicka, who's the Chief External Affairs Officer at PPF Group, covering PA, PR, regulatory thought leadership, and ESG in 23 markets, and a good friend of the Hudson Institute. Thank you very much for being here, Jan. And last, but of course certainly not least, Ambassador Nikki Haley, the Walter P. Stern Chair at the Hudson Institute. Please welcome Ambassador Haley.
All right, thank you very much. Again, thanks to everyone who's here in person joining us, those of you watching us at home via the live stream on hudson.org, or those of you across the country on C-SPAN who've joined us to listen to today's talk. This is the luncheon session, the keynote, if you will, of our third Central and Eastern Europe Strategy Summit, a kind of keystone event for Hudson Center on Europe, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two such wonderful colleagues and panelists here on stage. It's hard to begin anywhere but the current economic situation, given that this is World Bank IMF spring week, and therefore this does have a geoeconomics hue to it. And of course, the central geoeconomic question being asked is about the president's trade agenda, and in particular the imposition of tariffs. So I thought I'd go to you first, Ambassador Haley, and ask you, what do you think the administration's goals are on the tariffs, and what do you think, if you can put on your clairvoyant hat, is going to be the end result of the tariff policy?
I think this is something that President Trump talked about for a while. It's the imbalance. And I think what they're trying to do is change the entire global trade order to where we don't have such high surpluses, we don't have such big deficits, but we actually have a balance there. And so the thought process is, if you can go and start working with these tariffs, you bring down those surpluses, you bring up those deficits, and if you do that on a rolling 3 or 4 year term, then slowly you find some global order. The issue is, this is something where even to put up infrastructure can take up to 5 years. To reskill workers can take up to 18 months to 2 years. To try and shift where we need to go can take a while. So the key would be, let's start with national security items first and then work out. I think what they wanted to do was blanket it and say, no, let's go ahead and knock it out, see what we can get done. Now we're seeing it kind of walk back a bit and come to something of a more balanced conversation. I think it's great news that we're starting to see talks with India and Japan. I think that hopefully we'll start to hear about some trade deals going forward. But the goal, I think, really has been not just the deficits and surpluses, but the non-tariff barriers and what we're doing about, export controls and technology penalties and things like that. And so, I think at the end of the day, if you look at what they're looking for balance. Is this the way to go about doing it? It's a bit harsh.
Well, Jan, the first time I met you was at a think tank conference in Prague, but you said to me, look, I do this as a hobby. I'm really a banker at heart. So tell me, as a banker based in Prague, but who travels the globe, what is Europe's vantage point on these tariffs? And don't be too hard on us.
Yeah, first and foremost, great to be here. Hudson, second home for us. Thanks for leadership of John Walters and you guys and what you are doing for transatlantic partnership. It's really cool. So I'm not only a banker, I teach economics to students. And there are two things that every economics students got year one at college. It's Adam Ricardo, which is about that trade is not a zero-sum game, and that there are comparative win-win situation. And then there's second thing, it's not first year, maybe second year, and it's Smoot-Hawley effect. So Herbert Hoover administration, 1930, and there is plenty of other data supporting theoretically and practically that carte blanche, this kind of blanket tariffs is complicating situation not only for world, but for the attacker. And if you look on the data now, inflation, recession, etc., the market reaction. So as a banker and as a teacher, I would say it's a little bit harsh.
But I do want to say this. I think that this has opened up a conversation that needed to be had, because for too long, the U.S. was taking the brunt of so much. We heard it, whether it was talked about with NATO. We see it with the trade imbalances. This is a way that we're starting to see not just Europeans, but all countries say, you know what, maybe we do need to balance this. Maybe we are being too tough on U.S. goods. Maybe we need to start to balance this out. So what I appreciate is the willingness of countries to say, maybe the U.S. has a point. Maybe we should be doing more. And I think that that's the biggest sign. The fact that so many have come to D.C. and said, let's have talks, is a sign that, one, they do acknowledge that there was an imbalance, and two, they do want to try and see what they can do to help solve the situation.
On national security, let's call it products, for sure. We see it during the COVID. It's not only about semiconductors, or if we talk about renewable energy, so 96% dependency in solar and wind on China, for sure. Also during COVID, we saw it with drugs. There are only 2 places in the world that manufacture a huge majority of over-the-counters. Hyderabad in India and Guangdong province, China, and a little bit Tel Aviv. They're smart. So for sure. But then, I would say normal products, including maybe cars, where, if I'm not mistaken, the largest exporter of cars in the United States is BMW. So I think that to open a conversation about national security kind of trade part, for sure, we need to do our part as Europeans as well. I think to be more self-reliant, this is absolute must. It cannot be free lunch, again, from basic economics. So we've been living in the free lunch sphere, and our friends and partners for Germany, they've been even proud about it last 30 years, security from US and energy from Russia and trade to China, for sure.
I saw a smile cross Ambassador Haley's lips when BMW was mentioned, so let's go to Spartanburg. Most of the world knows you as UN ambassador because that's what drove a lot of your international travel. But before that, you were, of course, governor of South Carolina, and you dealt a lot with European business and investment. How do you view, as a former governor, European investment and trade with your home state or the U.S. writ large?
South Carolina was #1 in foreign direct investment when I was governor. And I will say that, 65% of our foreign direct investment in this country is from Europeans. So there is a big partnership that we have there. And, we do in South Carolina build more BMWs than any place in the world. We're very proud of that. And I think that what Americans also need to remember is in this talk of balance, when BMW came to South Carolina, that was thousands of jobs. And when they brought thousands of jobs, they also brought suppliers around that created even more jobs. And because of that, during my term, we were able to bring in Volvo. We were able to bring in Mercedes-Benz. So we have really benefited from the first move of BMW. But South Carolina is a completely different state because of that investment. And I think that's why we need to separate what's happening with trade, one, on a national security level, that yes, during COVID, we don't want to get our pharmaceuticals from China. We want to make sure we're getting it from allies like India and others. But at the same time, when you look at an automobile, I would always say we produce more BMWs than any place in the world. President Trump would say, no, you assemble more BMWs than any place in the world. And that's going to be the problem for manufacturers is if you look at BMW, those parts go back and forth multiple times in a lot of cases. And so the cost of these automobiles is going to go way up. What we need to do is be able to stagger that in that, yes, I am all for getting as much manufacturing in the U.S. as we can. But it's not going to happen in 30 days, and it's not going to happen in 90 days. So how do we do it in a way that rewards our partners like BMW, who really believed in that foreign direct investment, helps our American workers who have thousands of jobs because of it, and doesn't hurt our consumers who want to buy American-made but don't want to be punished for it?
Yeah, part of the impetus behind the Central Eastern Europe concept is that the Central Eastern European states have had rather impressive high growth over the years. Poland is now regularly considered the European tiger. And as you were talking, Ambassador Haley, you were mentioning some of the drivers of what might cause someone to invest or not to invest based on the tariffs. Jan, since you are in the leadership position of a company that has tens of billions of dollars invested, how do you decide where to invest? And in particular, maybe focus on some of your investments in Central and Eastern Europe, since that is the theme of this conference.
I will try to connect it to, let's call it transatlantic national security. So and it's true, we live now in different world than we lived last 30 years, happily. And we are example. As a PPF, we used to be happy child of globalization. In the same time, business in Kansas City, London, Moscow, China, and Jakarta. So we used to be very a Euro-Asian company. I lived 6 years in China and run business there. We decided already before COVID that world is becoming, we can call it deglobalized or decoupled or fragmented or multipolar. And we think that for us as a business, private conservative business, it's time to come home. We believe that it's best to do business in democracies. It's best to do mass market business. We are a mass market company, telecommunication, e-commerce, finance. To do it, there is a rule of law. Not enough is being said about China being a communist country with no equality in front of the law on a local level. Too much is Beijing, Washington, superpower, etc. But it's real. There is nationalism in Asia. So now we invest 85% of our money, Europe, US, Middle East. This is our turf. And we are very happy about it. And in case of Europe, You are absolutely right. 3 fastest growing economies of Europe: Poland, Romania, and Croatia. And all 3 countries were not that rich. I don't want to say poor, but 10 years ago it was different. Now, and it's not only about highways or consumables and FMCGs. It's about also national security. If you look at the Polish army, there are not enough tanks in the world that they can buy because they already buy everything here, so now they are going to Korea. Romania as a new Poland, you know, with a super large army as well. Not only NATO-based, but the United States. Taking care of Black Sea, working on Moldova topic. So
Romanians are smiling in the audience.
because we love Romanians. We are very happy investor there. So for us, we see this as a business opportunity as well. We definitely support, by the way, and yes, we can talk whether it's harsh or too pushy, but we support that United States in bipartisan manner, honestly, because previous administration was the same, telling us, hey guys, you need to spend more. And now Germany with new fiscal stimulus, it's a business opportunity. 1 trillion euro will be spent in next few years. So basically, this push is good. And if we won't overplay it in the relations between Washington and Europe, I think it's going to be fine.
I'd like to go to security in a minute, but first, since you've mentioned China twice now, I think Ambassador Haley brought it up earlier as well. Ambassador Haley, do you have any thoughts about how the US and Europe can coordinate on China policy?
Well, it looked like that's what we were starting to do before the Russian-Ukrainian war, was the conversation had gone to China. And I think the main thing is we need to never forget that China's the one that gave us COVID and didn't tell the world about it. Never forget how much intellectual property China continues to take. Never forget how they're building up their military. Never forget the aggression that they have on Taiwan every single day, or how aggressive they're becoming with more cyber attacks, or how they're continuing to try and figure out how they can have more dominance over the world. Because while Russia changed the narrative, China's still out there waiting and watching everything that Ukraine has done and the countries that have helped Ukraine, watching everything that Russia's doing, what they're getting right and what they're getting wrong. And China's learning from that. And I think the main thing that I would hope that our European brothers and sisters remember is it was an absolute mistake to ever be that dependent on Russia. It is just as dangerous to be that dependent on China. And I was in Europe a month ago and talking to many businesses, and they still want to do business with China. And they still talk about how they need China. And what I will say is, that's fine. If you choose to do business with China, it's fine. But when Russia invaded Ukraine and the rug was pulled out completely in one day, look at what happened to business. If that happens with China, it will be 10 times the level of what we all experience. So the key we should be focused on is what national security items is Europe dependent on China for now, and what national security items is America dependent on China now. And we should be making that completely urgent. That's the first thing we're looking at, and saying, how can we all work together to make sure that we're relying on each other for those things and not relying for Russia and China?
Jan, same question to you.
Amen. 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 No. Look. So, because lot is written and said about semiconductors, or I mentioned renewables, but during COVID, I lived in Hong Kong, and we have a business in 25 countries, and being old-fashioned conservative business, we believe that it's important to give back. So my owner and founder, he called me to Hong Kong and told me how many millions you want that you will buy sanitizers and masks for our employees and people in the countries. I told him sizable number, and then my procurement team in China mainland started sourcing it. And if you remember, China created a law, regulation that masks and sanitizers and so on are a national security product. And there was a ban on export. And it was very, very complicated to get it. And then the governments had to come to China, kiss the hand, even European governments, to get basic stuff like masks and sanitizers. So when there are these bottlenecks, a lot of stuff can be weaponized, for sure. And once again, I mention drugs. So here in the US, you have Advil. In Europe, we have similar drug called ibuprofen. There is not single factory in Europe, not a single one, for ibuprofen that we are popping like candy.
Don't do that, but yes.
So yeah, so I think this is a serious conversation. Also, renewables the same, and now rare metals and so on.
All right, well, we've just talked about China. We have to go to Russia because how can we not? And here, I'd just love to get Ambassador Haley's take on NATO writ large, the state of the alliance, what lessons it might have learned from the war in Ukraine to date as you see it and as you've been watching it.
I think it was important. President Trump in the last term said that NATO needed to be pulling their weight. And I think they all realized that. And so the goal at the time was 2% of defense spending. You know, out of the 32 countries, 23 have already gotten to that point, and I think that that showed great progress. Now they want to take it to 5%. You know, you look at Poland is already on its way. You look at Estonia is on its way. Lithuania is up at 4%. So they are all starting to move, but they still need to move further. And I think what the Russian-Ukrainian war did was really shed a light on why the U.S. was talking about it in the first place, is don't just rely on the U.S. for this. We all have to kind of make sure we're lifting up together. Now you look at the Russian-Ukrainian war, I think it's hugely important that we always defend and fight for freedom-loving countries. There's not that many of us. And so when it comes to that, we always need to embrace, we always need to support, we always need to do that. And I don't think we need to be writing blank checks to Ukraine. I've always said that. But I do think we should be supporting them with the ammunition and equipment that they need to win. They have proven to be amazing military fighters. They have proven to be a great friend and one to stand up when we needed them. I know at the United Nations, Ukraine was a great friend to us when I was ambassador. Now we're looking at a situation where Russia's trying to take advantage of the situation. They see that the U.S. wants to do a ceasefire. They want to do a deal. Russia's playing along. But what happens? They're playing along just enough to say no, right? What has Ukraine done? Ukraine's agreed for a ceasefire. Ukraine's agreed they wanted to extend the Easter ceasefire. Russia keeps saying, okay, but no. And now Russia's saying there will be no ceasefire until there's a deal. But yet they don't want to do a deal. So we have to see this for what it is. This is Putin being Putin. And what they've done very well is the misinformation they've put out there about Ukraine. We have seen it go rampant across the U.S. They have continued to kind of just push us along to make us think they're doing something. But at the end of the day, aggressors do what aggressors do. If we allow this Russian aggression to be rewarded, they will do it again. It's what he does. If he sees he gains land and is not punished for it, he will do it again. If we punish Ukraine for trying to protect themselves, what are you saying to freedom-loving countries everywhere? There are only certain times that we can look back and say, we have to know the difference between right and wrong. This is one of those times. And history will show that if we go and take the side of wrong, we all suffer. And the Central and Eastern European countries, they are the front line of defense. They're next. And so, you know, I would just strongly urge everyone to take a step back. And when you're looking at this fight between Russia and Ukraine, look at who really did the best fighting. But remember who started it. Who started this? Ukraine didn't start it. I don't think there's any way you can prove that Ukraine started this. Why? Because they wanted to be in NATO? That would have been a good thing. I think Ukraine and NATO would be a great thing. They've proven their fight. They've proven their might. They would make us stronger, and Russia would be chilled by it. So if you're not going to let them in NATO, at least we should stand up to Russia and say, you cannot invade a freedom-loving country. And every one of us should have no problem saying that. Because if we forgive Putin for this, Poland and the Baltics are next. And how many more do they have to go? And that's going to give China the green light for Taiwan. It really could create a snowball effect. We still have time to do the right thing. This is not about giving money to Ukraine. This is about calling out right and wrong and standing firm in that.
Jan, I saw you want to get in on this issue in general, but maybe I could also add to that a European flavor, which is from Prague's point of view, or maybe your point of view in Prague, how do you balance these calls for strategic autonomy with the imperative of keeping transatlantic unity?
So first, big kudos to brave soldiers of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Like, God bless them, because this is our security. The best security guarantee for Europe is now army in Ukraine, and then Poland and Romania and so on. There is one thing that there is one little difference between, let's call it Western Europe and Central Eastern Europe. In Central and Eastern Europe, we've always been quite cautious about Russia, and I can add to this. And there was always big love to the United States. Our countries were created thanks to the United States. 1917, 1918, then FDR and Truman, then Ronald Reagan, then Bill Clinton and Madeleine Albright. So there is strong support to American flag and the transatlantic values in every country here. So I think we are getting a little bit earlier than our colleagues, for example, in South Europe, even though they are frequently here, leaders from South Europe. We do our 2% NATO spending already, and we will do more. We need to be more active. We need to spend more on national security. There is a topic, not only hardcore hardware, the tanks and howitzers and so on. There is topic of sourcing and procurement. We touched China on this. Russian energy. I think we already learned how to live without Russian energy last 2 years, even Germany. So I think that we shouldn't go back. We shall decouple on this. And this is the way where we can have a, not us, because this is the European Commission, a right to negotiate trade, but to talk about LNG, to talk about transatlantic support in energy. Nuclear, Czech Republic is very pro-nuclear country like Poland and others here. So there is the way how we can help each other also in this thing. Finally, hybrid warfare. It was touched by Vice Prime Minister of Romania before. We as a PPF, we own largest TV station, TV network in Romania. Hybrid war is real. TikTok aggression is real. Disinformation is real. Attack of Russian bots, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, I can go on. It's very, very real. So also this kind of debate is necessary.
Ma'am, you already mentioned that the CE is on the front lines geographically facing Russian aggression. Can you talk a little bit about how you see this sort of sub-region, if we can call it that, Central and Eastern Europe? Jan just mentioned hybrid warfare. I saw you nodding along. Just the way it's sort of postured and equipped and facing Russia.
It's the cheapest form of warfare, and they've figured that out. I mean, look at what they've done. We saw it massively in the U.S. The European countries are feeling that the same way, whether it's disinformation, whether it's cyber attacks. It is about how do you weaken the Western countries. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. And I think Russia and China, Iran and North Korea, they're all doing it. And they're winning. They're winning at this. And until we acknowledge that what they're doing, that the hybrid warfare is real, until you acknowledge that, yes, there is something to the fact that TikTok is not balanced by algorithms of individuals. It's managed by algorithms from the Communist Party. That we have to acknowledge the truth. And so much of that, it's talked about on the side, but until we really face that, that's where they're really fighting. That's what they're doing. Yes, we're talking about, equipment and ammunition and drones and missiles. That's always going to be part of it. But really, the undercurrent of what's changing the narrative of all of this is that hybrid warfare that we're talking about, that disinformation. I mean, look back when the Ukraine-Russian war first started. Everybody was with Ukraine. Everybody was amazed that in 5 days, look at what they did. They were being hailed. And then now you look at it today, and what's the narrative? It's different things about Zelensky, it's about corruption, it's about all these other things. They are all Russian talking points. Every single one of them is Russian talking points. And Putin is smiling over it. And so we do have to acknowledge that, look, let's see the truth of what this is. And I think the other side of it is, we touched on this a little bit, I think Europe still needs to say, okay, what else can we do? 18% of European countries are still getting their resources from Russia. That's too much. We can't have that. I mean, that's the thing, is I think they made, big gains when it came to oil. But when it comes to LNG, again, Poland is getting more and more LNG from the U.S. I think we're starting to see Czech Republic is now finally independent for the first time in 60 years. But we need to have the Europeans start getting their LNG from us or from friendlies, because one, that brings us closer together as allies, but it also gets us further away from the aggressor.
Well, that's great. That's a positive agenda item, and maybe I'll send that question over to Jan, which is, if you got the phone call right now that the president wants to see you in the Oval Office, and you need to come up with a positive agenda en route, what are 2 or 3 things that you would recommend for positive American-European relations going forward? And I'm going to send the same question to Ambassador
Well,
Haley.
you might get the call before I get the call. Just let's be clear.
So look, as a banker, I would be hypercritical not to understand the value of transaction and transactionalism. It's absolutely fine. So first, I would say first debate, and I got it in debates with current administration officials before we debated about, okay, we have Russia as a problem, you have China as a problem. How we can help each other, how we can be more active to support the United States in Pacific. And this is normal. Second, okay, let's talk about defense spending. Already, with even Spain and Italy saying that they will go to 2% GDP on military spending. Now, if we calculate it, there will be $400 billion a year more money on military spending. Okay, let's talk about it. That, big chunk, because it's governmental contracts, unlike retail, etc. We are not in command economies, but this can be debated, because these governments, okay, we will spend chunk of this money here with old-fashioned hardware and new companies like software guys who are important, and drones, etc. So that's second, number 2. And third, again, strategic thing. Again, government can push it. It's energy, because in many countries of Europe we have either national providers of electricity or public-private, starting for France, finishing with Czech Republic. So in Czech Republic, Czech government is majority owner of major energy company. So Czech government as a majority owner can say, hey, it's going to be from US. So these 3 things, it's possible for the governments. And I think this is on the table, and it's absolutely fine, I think.
Ma'am, same question to you.
Now you are in White House.
You're back at the UN.
I think the main thing is domestically, I think we have to applaud President Trump on what he's done with illegal immigration. I mean, that was out of control. We see it's really been reined in. That's a big win. I think we have to applaud him for reducing the size of government. We all saw that as a problem, and we see that starting to be acknowledged, and Republicans once again are starting to understand the value of a dollar. That's a win. We're seeing energy prices go down. That was really important, and making sure that we pull back on the regulations and really start allowing those permits to flow. That's all been good. The main thing that we have to deal with, one, obviously, the economy, getting our tax cuts expanded, all that. So I think Trump should be praised for moving everything in the right direction, the way it needs to go. When it comes to foreign policy, the one thing I would want to say to President Trump is, America is strong. But the only way we're going to keep her strong is make sure you don't let Russia and China play you. That's the biggest thing, because right now they are. China is doing that in the way that they're with this tariff war. We see what they're doing. They're holding strong. There's no way they're giving in. They're going to wait and see who blinks first. And trust me, it's not going to be China. And Russia is holding on and thinking he can wait out Trump, because eventually they'll just walk away from Russia and Ukraine. That's what they're waiting on. Those are ways they would play them. And you said that you would say to President Trump, your issue is China, our issue is Russia. I would say our issue is Russia and China. We have the same enemies. And right now, we have to bring, the key is, the best way to overcome your enemies is to strengthen your friendships. And we should be strengthening our relationships so much that it makes China and Russia shake in their boots. And we have the ability to do that. That's the main thing the president could do going forward. And America would be strong and a leader for a very long time if we did that.
Yeah, and I've heard some reports that these tariffs have cooled the environment for some American companies operating in Europe, and there's less of an inclination to go American, for example, in the defense space. On the other hand, the president argues that tariffs are going to encourage and pull companies to invest in the U.S. to be able to leap over the tariff wall. Which of those two trends do you think is more likely to win out?
Second one. So look, hey, look, it's, again, to push for trade policy is absolutely fine. And if there is one thing that we as Europeans were very scared while pushing our Green Deal and super complicated ESG and thousands of papers just in our company written on disclosures, super big headache. And then your previous administration created IRA. Very, very simple law that, yes, we thought a lot, like, okay, for our manufacturing, because we also have a heavy machinery companies, we will have to go to the United States. So to push trade policy either this way or that way, it's possible if it's simple enough, stable enough, and predictable enough. Anything else, again, we are not in command economies. Czech government cannot push Czech investors to go to the United States at the end. So unpredictability is a big problem. That's one thing. Second thing, and this is, again, basic economics. So it's good, guys, for you that you are a service-driven country. It's good that you don't have agriculture, base like somewhere in Africa, or that you are not doing cheap manufacturing. From national security perspective, you need to have more, for sure. As I said, semiconductors, pharmacy, etc. But, who will do the manufacturing jobs here? Just look on your unemployment rate. And you don't want to have immigration. In Europe, we need more workers. That's why we are open to, let's call it, high-quality immigration. If you don't want to do it, who will work in those factories? Yeah, so it's a very complex issue. My advice would be there is a trade as free as possible. This is good for everyone. And again, economics, who is on the top, and United States as the richest country in the world and most powerful, they are benefiting. And then national security topics, much more than today. And yes, it at the end shall be maybe subsidized by the governments if you want to have a manufacturing here of certain products that are needed. But I would be skeptical.
All right, well, since you said skeptical is your last word, I can't let that be the last intervention. And I noticed on the presidential campaign trail that Ambassador Haley liked to always end on a positive, uplifting, joyous note. So I'm not even going to ask a question. I'm just going to say, on the topic of transatlantic relations, please bring us home with a positive message.
Well, and I can do it very sincerely and genuinely. I mean, we are brothers and sisters that appreciate freedom. And that matters. And I think that trade brings us together, closer, And I think that there will be trade deals that will happen. I think that they are already saying in DC that they're working on multiple trade deals. I fully expect that to happen. I think that's what we all want to see. You know, the one thing I'll say is don't let, you know, it hasn't even been 100 days yet. So don't let the roller coaster of what this 100 days have been define where we go. I think what we need to remember is things are going to start to settle out. And what we need to remember is who are our friends and who are our enemies. And let's make sure we keep that in check. I will always say America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. And you know, to get a friend, you have to be a friend. And so the United States needs to always remember to be friends. But our European friends need to understand, too, that what we are trying to do is tough love. And tough love means, you know what, we know you can do more on national security. We know you can bring down some of those export penalties. We know that you can balance out trade a little bit. Let's all do that because it has to be tough love and remembering at the end of the day we're united. And I think if we do that, truly, all of us will get through this stronger. I have no doubt about that. We see that with the Europeans already saying, we're going to go and support Ukraine, whether the U.S. does or not. That's an amazing move by the Europeans to say, we're going to find our strength. And I think that's something we need to, and the U.S. appreciates that. We'll respect that. And so I think that's really important. And the U.S. needs to understand, too, that we're better together with our friends. And so I think we're going to end up in the right place through all of this. It might be a little messy, but we'll get there.
Well, thanks. And this is the penultimate session. So there's one more to come on Ukraine. But before Dan Kochis announces whatever comes next, a break or that we roll right into the last session, please join me in thanking Ambassador Haley and Jan Ruzicka for their comments today.
Fellow here at the Center on Europe and Eurasia, and I don't know that there's an American who knows the country of Ukraine as well as Luke Coffey. He's a true friend of Ukraine. So Luke, if you could take your seat on stage. Joining us as guests from Ukraine, Dr. Olga Zikolova, Deputy Finance Minister of Ukraine. You were appointed in 2022. She's responsible for the development and implementation of the state policy in the area of cooperation with foreign governments and international financial organizations. Dr. Zikova started her career in 2008, holding senior positions in asset management companies with coverage of investment policy issues. Welcome to Hudson Institute. And last, but certainly not least, Dr. Yuri Haley, who since July 2020 has served as Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Ukraine. He has degrees from the International Relations and Law Departments of the Ivan Franko National University in Lviv. After graduation, he worked at the National Bank of Ukraine, where between 2003 and 2015, he went from a Category 1 economist to head of unit within the Banking Supervision Department. Welcome to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan, for that introduction, and thanks to everyone who stayed after Governor Haley to hear the panel that, in my opinion, is perhaps one of the most important panel discussions of the day because it's about Ukraine. And, you know, sometimes when we talk about why Ukraine matters to us in the United States, we talk about things like international rules-based order or helping our allies and partners defend themselves and these sort of more abstract ideas. But when you get down to it, Ukraine matters to us because Europe matters. And Europe matters for the economic reasons that you've heard here today by multiple speakers on different panels. And Ukraine is part of that European community, linked economically, and maybe someday, for certain someday, linked even closer to Europe, both institutionally and in terms of connectivity, trade, and transport. So this is why it matters, because Europe is so important to the United States, and therefore Ukraine is also important for our economic well-being. And what a prize it will be whenever there is a just and honorable peace for Ukraine to get fully integrated formally in the Euro-Atlantic community. The economic potential, in terms of economic growth, natural resources, farming, the tech sector, defense exports. There's a great prize for everyone to have here, having a safe, prosperous, and secure Ukraine. And this is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. But we're also going to talk about what it is like operating as a deputy finance minister, as a deputy governor of the national bank during a wartime setting. So with that, I would ask each speaker to give some introductory remarks about what you're thinking about, what you're focused on, why it matters here in Washington, what you're doing here in Washington. All of that would be fantastic. So Dr. Zykova, I'll start with you first.
Thank you, and thank you for having this possibility to be present today at the Hudson Institute event. I think that, as you rightly said, the topic itself is very elegantly describing where we stand now. Ukraine is the resource for the defense and economic dynamism. When we track ourselves back into February of 2022, we understand that at that point of time, we did not have a textbook sample how to deal with the inflation which surged to 26.6%. We didn't have a textbook sample what to do when you have actually the war ongoing with no clear plan with the partners how to structure the support coming to Ukraine. And the level of uncertainty which we had witnessed that time actually became our perfect storm to make unconventional measures. And I think this is the first step which allowed us to actually withstand, especially during the first months of the war and throughout of 2022. Yes, we had to turn to the monetary finance, and yes, we had to actually ask the third party, which was IMF at that time, to identify a very clear need on a monthly basis to have conversations, including in April of 2022 during spring meetings, of having 5 billion per month as a critical minimum to ask the partners to cover it. Throughout the year, we managed to elaborate on the tools which allowed us to transparently navigate through the financing coming to Ukraine for the social expenditures coverage, while all internal resources were devoted purely for the defense campaign, which was growing drastically. 2023 was already quite different picture in a more optimistic way with regards to clear planning. So we stepped from the short-term, almost weekly budget planning to full-fledged 3-year midterm budgeting, which allowed us even more transparency and accountability to be provided to the partners to show that we have a clear plan budget-wise. Internally, domestic homework is ongoing, while also heavily relying on the partners like IMF. And this is why we are now under the IMF-EFF arrangement with already 7 reviews being successfully completed, which also gives, a kind of the understanding how Ukraine is navigating through high demand for military expenditures while being very precise and committed on reform agenda. And I think that this is the core point here. While we are keeping the macroeconomic stability and navigating between survival and midterm vision on EU integration and midterm vision on how we proceed working with the partners, we still need to understand that in addition to macroeconomic stability, which we need to keep on daily basis, we also need to navigate through the military campaign. And those on the front line are actually needing our backup to proceed fighting. So how we entered this year? This year we entered with a fully funded budget gap, mainly through the initiative on ERA loans. And it allowed us to actually have the very clear understanding where we stand fiscal-wise. Probably my colleague will dive deeper into how we see the situation on the monetary fund, but it is in a very close collaboration with the central bank that the policies allowed for these kind of the outcome that we have the budget gap fully covered. Secondly, we have a clear plan with the partners like European Union under the Ukraine facility and IMF EFF arrangement, which I already mentioned, which gives the clarity for the two dimensions. The first one is reform agenda. Just to give you a simple sample, more than 300 conditionalities to be met throughout this and next year, which include quite tough issues like, for instance, anti-corruption institution capacity building, or the reform on core sectors which have not been covered before the war. And I think that we took this moment of the war as the bifurcation point of the history, when Ukraine is actually having the possibility to decisively react to the war conditions doing these kind of reforms, which historically wise were deeply enrooted as quite politically uncomfortable and unattractive, I would say. Secondly, we are keen on transparency with regards to the use of the funds and with regards to actually planning the reconstruction, no matter whether it is a short-term recovery, quick recovery, which we actually started when the war started. So we are not waiting for the magic moment to come when we start reconstruction, but also with regards to the bigger picture. And we touch base on this even during these spring meetings, is the use of the immobilized Russian assets. While the proceeds of these assets are backing of our ERA loans, which we receive from G7, at the same time, we see the more open attitude of the core partners to actually be more precise on the discussions with regards to the use and seizure of the assets themselves. Because this is the reality. If we compare the figures for this year, 26.3% of GDP is the defense and military sector. Purely internal.
Not bigger than the 2% of GDP. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we talk.
Exactly.
And purely internal resources, including the tax and customs revenues, which already show overperformance this year, including internal borrowings and issuance of the war bonds. All these resources are mainly directed towards this big amount of the defense and military campaign needs. While at the same time, we understand that we need to be very disciplined in delivering our commitments on the reform agenda, because otherwise we ruin the trust issue and we ruin, the framework which has been built even prior the war. Back in 2020, we thought that COVID crisis is significant crisis for Ukraine, and our financial plight was withstanding that crisis quite good, and we entered 2024 on good foot fiscal-wise. But at the same time now, the discussions are more towards not only keeping what we achieved, but actually thinking and looking quite forward. The World Bank is working with us on economic strategies. IFC, BRD are working with us on attracting private capital equity for better plan on reconstruction. But this exercise is non-trivial, and I would say again that it's not, unfortunately, or fortunately in our case, to be the experience, a textbook sample. So probably it's a kind of introduction for you to feel the flavor where we stand now, and I'm more than happy to dive deep into the discussion following the panel.
Thanks for that overview. I mean, it served as a reminder that what is happening on the battlefield and then what happens in the rest of Ukraine in terms of the economic activity, these are all linked.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just support Ukrainians with munitions and ignore all the other parts of running a state. If you want Ukraine to be successful in the war, you have to support all of Ukraine, and a key part of that is the economic side of things. Dr. Haley, could you offer us your take from the National Bank?
First of all, thank you for inviting. Thank you for Hudson Institute support. It's crucial for us. Thank you, colleagues, for support the United States is providing to our country is crucial. 3 years of full-scale invasion, Ukraine continues to stand resilient, not only on the battlefield, but also economically. It was not easy. We were prepared, but it's impossible to be prepared 100% for the war. We have to fine-tune daily our approaches, monetary policy, our communication with government, with Ministry of Finance. We have to protect our independence, our mandate. But still, I believe we have strong institutions which are running our country quite successfully. The toll of this war has been immense, and near a quarter of our population has been displaced. Infrastructure is targeted by Russia, but our population is showing courage, and we are ready to fight. We are ready to protect our country. It's only one way how to let our kids to have independent Ukraine. It's crucial for us because aggressor Russia is ready only to destroy. They're not ready to create. And we have to understand this. They're not focusing on prosperity of Russia. They are focusing only on damaging other countries. They need this to have support inside of Russia for this regime, Putin's regime. What is crucial for us? We are facing many challenges. First of all, fiscal deficit is very high. We are dependent on defense spending. As Olya mentioned, it's a huge deficit. We have to finance, first of all, with support of international partners, with support of US and other G7 countries, but as well we have to focus on debt policy. We have to attract resources inside of Ukraine. I believe we achieved quite good results in terms of preserving macrofinancial stability, doing reforms. Good benchmark for reforms is IMF. Already we completed 7 reviews. Hopefully next month we'll proceed with next review. It's like benchmark for you, for our international partners to understand what is going on inside of Ukraine, and it's brought some predictability to our macroeconomic management, and is crucially central in for our long-term reconstruction and for reforms agenda. What is crucial as well for us is EU integration. We are part of Europe. We are protecting Europe. We are like last line of protection. I believe Europe is not ready to fight on the battlefield, and Ukrainians are ready to fight because we are facing on daily basis this crazy crooks, this aggressor who is ready, as I mentioned, only to destroy. They're not ready to create. When we discuss our economic performance, last year our economy grew by 3.4%. First of all, main contributors was like energy infrastructure and repairs of energy infrastructure. It was business and consumer sentiment and strong public spending. It's clear nowadays in the area of this huge fiscal deficit, public spending is key driver. In first quarter of this year, growth is quite moderate. We are still dealing with disruption of energy system, increased gas imports. Russians are targeting our energy infrastructure, gas infrastructure, and we have to import gas. It will have negative impact on our balance of payments. We have to pay in euros, in US dollars for import of gas. Before the war, we are mainly focused on like internal sources, but the situation changed quite considerably. Looking ahead, what is crucial for our economy in order to ensure GDP growth, first of all, is stronger harvest. We achieved quite good results last year. Hopefully this year harvest will increase. Crucially is energy infrastructure and support from international partners. Thank you again to your country.
Thank you. I would like to pose a few questions to expand on some of these very good points that you made. Dr. Zykova, firstly, you mentioned about the reforms, the EU reforms that are ongoing even during a time of war. I could only imagine that trying to reform your economy and your system of government and judicial processes while also fighting a war of national survival is like building a ship while you're already out in the ocean.
Yeah.
So how do you prioritize, as you go through the key, through the different chapters, how are you prioritizing where the reforms are made? What what areas have you been progressing nicely? What areas is there still a lot of work to do as it pertains to your view, being from the Ministry of the Finance Ministry?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, you know, it's hard to prioritize when you understand that in the whole reform matrix, which we actually incorporated from various structural benchmarks and commitments we have with different partners like the World Bank, IMF, European Union. Altogether, it's hundreds of the points, but it's not simply the words on the list. So we actually want to meet several objectives. First and foremost, for sure, it's EU candidacy. So we really treat this time in a decisive way as the EU candidate with all the reforms and conditionalities envisaged for these kind of alignment with EU standards and recommendations, or we work on them. The second one is economic growth. For sure, we cannot allow ourselves not to do tough things now. There are no easy reforms. It is a critical objective. And to win the war and to recover, we need not only short-term growth. And this is the reality that we faced from the very beginning of the war. And we actually are keeping to the point that we are thinking proactively in a long-term perspective. Revenue mobilization is actually helping us to withstand macrofinancially and gives us the time and possibility to work more on the reform agenda. We continue to implement structural reforms. Why it is important to outline that these are structural reforms is that you will not find the sample of the country with actually having such a time frame for such kind of reforms. So as you rightly mentioned, judicial reform, anti-corruption institutions, capacity building in the government to introduce the alignment with the European Union standards, including transport sector, energy sector alignment with the EU. All these aspects cannot go, separately. So the teams are to work very interconnectedly with regards to making sure that judicial reform being the basis for each and every other reforms is in place, which is, on the one hand, has the political will to happen, and secondly, we have, again, the support, the technical assistance from the partners to make it in the right way, to understand what are the very best case scenarios which we can incorporate or mirror in our experience. We were thinking, well, even 2 years ago, there was a kind of competition between the partners and IFIs, how to help Ukraine and what to do best to structure properly and to make the very visible and transparent way to take a look what Ukraine is actually doing on the reform agenda. But then we navigated through this competition in a right way, and we came up with the conclusion that we introduced public investment management system in Ukraine. So I think that this is the reform which allows the partners not only to see how the reform agenda looks like, but actually to work on the single project pipeline and to understand what donors are covering what particular sectors in what particular projects. Public investment management system itself will actually allow us to be first transparent, secondly very accountable with regards to have a showcase, because Ukraine now, we want to have the understanding that the partners also have the lessons learned from our experience. And these lessons learned are not only about the concept of the resilience or the unity, which are the grounded basis for everything we do, but actually also the lesson learned on how the country under the most drastic conditions can actually transform to the very best of it. So I think that this is the idea that we are following with each and every reform. The PIM reform, which I said, it will actually help us for the post-war recovery, because it's not simply the basket of the things to do on reform agenda, but this is the very critical analysis of the sequencing of the steps. It is extremely difficult to plan and to have the sequences under the war conditions, but once it is done, it gives more clarity for the partners that it's not only about the figures to be on the macroeconomic indicators or on the budget, which you can see in a transparent way. It is also about the critical plan on the steps to be taken in a very clear sequence.
And I want to ask you a little bit later on some specific examples of lessons that you have learned, because Ukraine unfortunately is going through this unique set of circumstances where you're having to navigate these reforms, navigate fiscal policies during a wartime condition, and I know that brings its own challenges. And actually, that's a good segue into Dr. Haley, who I wanted to ask you about. Of course, the National Bank also has to face these unique circumstances, these challenges of operating day to day in a wartime environment. And I want to ask specifically about an issue that has impacted not just Ukraine, but most of the world, and that's inflation and controlling inflation and fighting inflation. How do you sustain that market and public confidence in dealing with inflation during a period of wartime, of fighting for national survival, with all the other economic challenges that you face?
First of all, our mandate has not changed. It's price and financial stability. And during this war time, we adopted, fine-tuned our approaches. What is crucially important to emphasize is that ultimately there would be no price stability to talk about if you were to lose the country. That's why crucially important for us was, first of all, to help our government to finance deficit. And in first year of the war, we provided monetary financing in the amount of 400 billion hryvnia. It's around, in currently fixed, $10 billion. It was not an easy decision for us, but it's a crucial element to safeguard our country. As well, we have to proceed with changes to our monetary policy. First of all, we fixed the exchange rate. We imposed strict currency controls to avoid unproductive capital outflow. And what was crucial, it was to have communication with society, with banking community, business community, to ensure trust in the activities of the National Bank. And I believe we proceeded with this quite successfully. Dialogue with Ministry of Finance, frankly, it was not easy first year because Ministry was not ready. We increased our key policy rate from 10 to 25% in one move. It was quite significant increase to fight against inflation. The time inflation was around 18%, and we managed to have positive rate. Ministry of Finance was not happy because they have to increase yields. But still, we managed to succeed. Next year and last year, 2023 to 2024, it was net financing without monetary financing, net financing for the budget. Debt market was ready and banks were ready to provide resources. And it helped to attract enough funding for budget. Macro-financial stability was in place. Banks' activities are sound, liquidity is in good shape, but we have to adjust to analyze situation on basically ongoingly on daily basis to understand what to improve, how to close loopholes in our FX controls, how to deal with performance of banks. It's not easy. It's not. I would like to repeat again. It's not ready. It's not possible to be ready, to be prepared for this kind of events. You have to adjust. You have to communicate with banks, with government, and try to find proper solutions. Inflation, we are nowadays tightening. Already we increased for second time in March. Key policy rate is 15.5. And we will be ready only to decrease. You will see that trajectory for inflation is downwards. That's why Ministry, I believe, is not so happy with this because they increased yields on govies. But we understand that macro-financial stability is our cornerstone for success of our economy.
Even during war, it's something that has to be done, absolutely. Dr. Zykova, a lot of your remit is that international cooperation, international engagement when it comes to the Ministry of Finance. You're here this week, of course, for the World Bank IMF spring meetings. And you talked about in your introductory remarks the importance of the international support that you have received. And you said it's important for both immediate stabilization, but also long-term economic recovery and reconstruction. But how do you prioritize or how do you balance these two competing needs? Because understandably, you need stability right now, but you can't wait until the fighting is over before you start rebuilding. So how is that balance approached?
You know, anyway, we need to prioritize. So this is inevitable, and you need to make sure that your most critical needs are covered. You will not hear, any other sample of the country in the state of war when from the very first days and throughout the wartime, the social payments are being paid in full with no postponement on the payments to the elderly, pensions, salaries to healthcare workers, to teachers. This is our priority where we need the external financing coming. So our initial plan, as the budget looked very simple, almost 50-50 defense versus social, we started to mobilize internally the resources towards the military campaign while advocating for the need and to provide all the transparent tools together with the World Bank and IMF to have the external funding coming to mainly cover these social priority expenditures. This is still #1 priority for us. Of course, housing sector, huge needs. Recently, the World Bank had its fourth report on rapid damages assessment, and it is $500 billion. A big ticket, right? And you will not find the solution, even with all the countries involved and with all the IFIs stepping in to cover that kind of needs. So the question then arises, either to think proactively on building back better and not to simply rebuild the school which was damaged or destroyed, but rather to think of relocation of people, building smarter and more efficient solutions, and actually to make sure that you are rebuilding the country not in a very direct way of it, but actually thinking proactively of how it will actually affect the welfare of the citizens. And here is where we will anyway depend on the IFI's financing first and foremost, but it's mainly for the short-term recovery, because actually if you take a look at the figures, what we have received from our partners for the budgetary social expenditure support, this is already more than $130 billion from the start of the war. And with this figure in mind, we need to understand that, yes, of course, we received grants among those, but the majority is concessional funding. And to have the debt sustainability in place, we still to be critical enough to understand that the repayment should be there. The same with the IMF program. Yes, for sure, we envisage anchoring the reforms and the financing from the partners, but at the same time, this program is very strict on us to be in a clear reform discipline way. There is, we cannot allow ourselves as the governments to choose between housing sector, energy, when the missile attack were hit at once, especially during the first quarter of this year, or the social infrastructure. But here, when it comes again to the question of the private sector involvement, investments to come, and the use of the Russian assets as the way to pay for what the Russia has done. And probably this is also part of the lessons learned, so that you need any way to prioritize. So this is a tough decision, but you cannot allow yourselves to let the doctors be in without the salaries.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you rebuild, for instance, the school in town, but there will be no teachers to be there for the kids, right? Yeah. What's the sense of the recovery and the reconstruction itself? So this sequences is needed to make sure that people both remain and those who had to flee the country, they get back. And to make these conditions work, it is not enough, unfortunately, only to rely on domestic policies, even with the huge support from the international community as of now.
Yeah, prioritizing public spending during peacetime is difficult enough, often, politically speaking, for politicians. So doing it during war just adds another level of complexity and stress. Dr. Haley, you have been in this role as Deputy Governor of the National Bank since, I believe, July of 2021? 2020. Yeah,
Yes.
July. I discounted a year. July 2020.
Yes, before that I was Minister of Finance.
Right. So you have been in this role from before the large-scale invasion to during this large-scale invasion. How have you had to change the way you do business day to day, the way you approach the challenges that the National Bank faces?
First of all, we have to ensure operational continuity. All our systems and protocols work. Very good example is the following. On 1st January 2025, Russian drone hit the main building of the National Bank. But all our systems continue to operate without interruption. What was important, we developed so-called power banking project for our banking system. Is joint network of bank branches that cover all of Ukraine. And these branches can operate without interruption. They have, first of all, alternative energy sources. They have backup communication channels. It's crucial for normal banking activity. Even during blackouts, our banking system is operating. It was crucial. How we changed our approach? First of all, as I already mentioned, in monetary policy area, we implemented new approaches. One very good example is so-called benchmark bonds. We allowed to cover monetary instrument reserves requirement, which with benchmark bonds, it allowed to create channel from monetary policy to finance fiscal deficit. Around $8 billion was attracted by ministry using this channel. Another important tool unconventional tool to fight inflation was 3-month CDs. This new instrument to attract hryvnia savings into banks and to decrease pressure on the fixed market. Like, we are in constant dialogue with government, with IMF, and trying, first of all, to protect public savings, people savings, in order to decrease pressure on the fixed market and to save our fixed reserves. It's crucial for macrofinancial stability.
Mindful of the time, but I want to ask each of you one more question, and it's the same question. We are learning, we being the United States, Europe, like-minded countries around the world, we are learning so much about just modern warfare and what conflict is like in the 21st century by what's happening, what Russia is doing to your country. From your point of view, in terms of economic, fiscal, monetary policy, what is probably the most important lesson each of you has learned through this process? Dr. Zakova, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's not an easy question to answer, because actually what comes to my mind will cover not only fiscal economic plight, but actually what lessons learned might be implied on each and every part of life when you are under
That's
such
even better.
circumstances.
Then
Yes.
everyone will get something out of it.
First and foremost, it probably sounds very simple, but I think that the first lesson we all learned is the importance of unity and solidarity. Sometimes I think under various conditions throughout the geopolitical turmoil, and political cycles in a row, we need to remind ourselves that these are not simply concepts. Unity and solidarity are those tools which help the nation to endure and help overcome even the most brutal of the wars. When we come to the concept of resilience, it also changed. So everyone used to think about resilience as, military safety, or let's say military strength to withstand the war. But at the same time, we need to rethink the concept of resilience now. I think that we already come to the point that it's about economic endurance. It is about the social cohesion. And it's not only about, the military strength itself, but actually we come to the point that it is about the will to persist under the immense pressure. And when we come under this change of the concept of the resilience, it's easier for us to have, a clear planning on military plight, on economic plight. But it is very important for me, to have this message shared with you, so that it's really about the social cohesion and economic endurance here. And I think that Ukrainian resilience has already become, a kind of a separate definition, when the combination of human spirit united in purpose already gives you the most formidable of adversaries. And the third one, I would say, is adaptability and deterrence. We would never be able either to have the negotiations held, or to have the domestic policies rolling on and keeping the governmental functions on track without very decisive, quick adaptability to the reality. And the earlier you face the reality as it is, the cooler your mind is on actually making domestic policies work better. And I think Ukraine's ability to pivot and adjust to shifting conditions on ground are actually giving you the sense of the flexibility. And just a sample, IMF has never had the program with a country in the state of war. They had to change the narrative and to adapt their mandate towards new reality. The World Bank has never had such amount of the tools allowing transparent attraction of the funds, while providing a very clear report on each and every dollar, euro, and other currency spent by Ukraine, with a very open attitude towards the partners and responsibility of Ukraine in front of the bank to actually report on and have the respective reforms being implemented to align with the funds coming through these tools. So this also gives us the understanding that even the most bureaucratic mandates are to be broadened to the extent which the reality requires them to do. So I think these 3 points would be my lessons learned as of now.
Right. Resiliency, society cohesion, and adaptability, and 26% GDP on defense. Great. Dr. Haley, from your point of view, what's the lesson that you have learned that we should take away?
First of all, it's important to proceed with reforms in order to have prosperous society. In this case, people will be ready to fight for country, for families. It's crucial. It's important to be part of civilized world, to have partners, to create new alliances, to be part of NATO is crucial. It's important to invest in defense. It's important to have educated people which will be ready again to fight for country and to die for country. My view is crucial. Fiscal monetary policy, we will find solutions. But first of all, we need prosperous society.
I think those were fascinating answers, because I was here waiting for this technocratic answer that I frankly wasn't going to understand, but I was going to nod up here like I was understanding. And instead, we got a very passionate display of what makes Ukraine great. And it's going beyond what their narrow focus is day to day and looking at the society as a whole and what we can learn from Ukraine. So I want to thank both of you for taking time to come here. Anytime American policymakers, commentators can hear Ukrainians, it's a good thing. So please join me in thanking them. And I will now turn it over